Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic show on this Friday, the 5th of October, 2018. A warm welcome if you've just joined us as a viewer or as a commenter. And as always, a warm welcome to my amazing co-host, Stops. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Hey guys, yes, I'm all refreshed now. But it was really, I got soda water. Here's water. Oh, next week. This is really this.
Yeah, I've got my water here as well. Hopefully you're all settled in there. For hopefully it'll be an interesting show, especially
Enemies of God. Hello, enemies of those things that don't exist. Praying to the deity that you don't believe exists. It's so good.
Yes, indeed. And maybe I'll talk about that. So, Dawah Man, remind me about that. I might talk about that a little bit later on afterwards.
Oh, Lily's even Lily's here. She finished telling her story. I thought you're going to draw the hundreds of viewers away from us all listening with bated breath as you're telling your story.
Well, perhaps Lily will want to join us, and if Thunderous or anybody else wants to join, just drop me a message on Facebook. I need to be able to see you on Facebook, and you can join us. It'll be more of an open thing today. The topic revolves around an incident with Stops, which he'll relay a little bit later on. And Abu is going to join us as well. So let me drop that in there as well. Maybe we'll have a live discussion. He's a stranger. Who is this person? But good. So we'll just wait. I think Abu's going to join us in like one moment here. So we'll just hang on a moment for him. So I hope everybody's well there. Just having a quick look at the comments before we get started proper. And we've got some fascinating comments for you today. And Go Live Media, we're critics of Islam. So it depends what you mean by enemy. You'd have to define what you mean by enemy. I'm a critic of Islam. I don't think it's true, and I think it's overall has a negative, detrimental effect on society. Good evening, Abu. How are you, my good sir? Welcome back.
Thank you. How are you doing?
We're good. How are you? You've been away, haven't you, on long journeys?
Yeah.
How's Mars?
Mars is...
Oh, sorry, it was a Mars bar.
Mars is both cold and hot.
That dichotomy. Good show. Anything you want to share with us, Abu, before we get going?
No, shoot.
All right, let's add in some comments here.
Yeah, okay. Before you, because Go Live Media, absolutely. We always give preference to Muslims who want to join. That's always like that, okay? Because we value the opinion of Muslims when it comes to the Muslim belief, because after all, Islam is a Muslim belief. So if you have anything to say, if you think that we are doing something wrong, by all means, criticize us. By all means, if we're doing something wrong, you are more than welcome to correct us. So, and if you want to come here on the show and say, okay, I have a topic, I want to discuss this, either it doesn't really matter whether we've done anything wrong or not. If there's anything that you want to discuss and give us your opinion on a specific topic, you are always welcome to do that, okay? Just to get this clear. There's no need to run away.
I'm just replying to somebody here. If you want to join, somebody's asked there, they need to friend me on Facebook. I'm not just going to give out the link. It happens, by the way, on others, and I'll have to concede this as well, which I don't mind because it's the truth, whatever's the truth. There's trolls on all channels. I've seen trolls on Abu Tablets, as he's now being called, Abu Talha's channel. There have been trolls on there. There have been trolls on Saeed's channel. So there's trolls everywhere. So it's not just, potentially Islamic or Islamic, certain Muslim trolls. They are just trolls. So I think most Hangouts now reserve the link. So if somebody wants to join the show, I don't have a problem. They need to friend me on Facebook or privately on Google Hangouts in some way. I'm just not going to give the link out publicly because then we have to monitor for trolls all the time. And that's just unhelpful. Got 44 people watching and 9 thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy the show. Even if you disagree with us, at least it's a place where we can come and discuss ideas and critique. And again, if you think we're attacking or if you think we are in some way this mythical Islamophobic, then come on and tell us why you think that is the case and defend this mythical word. Because I think most of us on the panel here think that's just a made-up word, a bit like your religion. And with that said, let me share my screen for some of the crazy comments. And let me say again, and I'll bring it up a little bit later on anyway, these comments do not represent all Muslims. However, those people that say it's a religion of peace and that, there's only a few Muslims, the part of the reason that I show this anyway is to show how many comments there are. And sure, there's some comments from atheists and Christians and so forth as well that are unpleasant, but this isn't an Islamic show, and it's not a representation of all Muslims. And with that said, here's our first one. As always, Tan, and there you can see me in the background with all my kit. Raj, you coward, you can't answer me. Guess I will come to London to confront you and Tan. Or amazing intellect and knockdown arguments, or something else. It's amazing how often this sort of thing happens. Can you see my screen, by the way, Stops and Abu?
Yes.
Stops, you've gone very soft there, by the way. You moved away again from your mic or something.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Cool.
I can't drink coffee or water with the mic in front of my mouth.
No, that would be a bit difficult. I'm a converted Muslim by just listening to these debates. Dr. Zakir, the more people criticize Islam, the more it grows, and the more people revert. That's the beauty of Islam. Oh dear.
Yeah, but by then, if you follow that logic, by now there should be no non-Muslims left. But we're still looking at something like less than 20% of the entire population being Muslim. So 80%, God failed.
Exactly. And the number of people deconverting, not birth rate, because obviously if you have 10 children in a family, that's going to raise the number. But those children aren't choosing, and they haven't got critical thinking. And so they're brought up in whatever their environment is. So we can't really count them. Yes, they're Muslim, but they're not Muslim because they've thought about it critically and know what they're talking about or have examined the text. But the reverts, the people who are deconverting, should I say, outstrips the converts to Islam, not reverts, converts, because revert assumes that everybody's a Muslim, and that's not been demonstrated, so we can easily dismiss that claim. But those people who are converting are outstripped by at least 20-fold. So it's around 3.3 million that are projected to convert to Islam by 2050, and about little over 60 million to deconvert or change over, whatever. We don't like the word convert, but maybe
I was just going to say convert is such a stupid word. In and of itself, you cannot convert. What do you mean convert? What changes? I don't
well, your whole worldview, I guess. I mean, maybe it's the whole worldview. Suddenly you've got a whole, for us that don't believe this, it doesn't inform the rest of our worldview, because for many of the believers, much of their worldview changes. Then they assume that has to be the case when you're a non-believer as well.
Okay, I can convert water into beer, okay, by adding hops and barley and yeast and things. But that's a conversion, right? Because you are taking something and making it into something else. Is a Muslim something else? Is that a different kind of person? No, it's a human being. It's just that the mind is corrupted. It's just that the mind is full of something that is, make-believe and relatively idiotic. But it's not that it's a different kind of, like human. It's not a different species. So you're not really converting. What you're doing is you're joining a different club. I mean, if I'm changing from BMW to Audi, I'm not converting. It's just that I'm joining a different place.
Well, in a sense, I guess you're converting manufacturers, but yes, it's not the same as, like you say, converting something physical. But you convert from BMW, you now become a, whatever it is, Audi converts. I suppose it's there, but on a bigger scale, it's their worldview.
And exactly like Lily says, revert is really stupid. I mean, that's, as you said, it's assuming that everybody is somehow a Muslim. No.
Yes.
A baby has no clue what a God is. A baby has no clue what it is. And then if a baby or a dog says, wow, 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 and they say that this means Allah, 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 then you're stupid.
What are you saying, Stop? Do you say that converts to Audi are humans?
Thank you.
Good to have Abu back there. Good. Next. Yeah. So obviously there's a built-in assumption which hasn't been demonstrated. And the beauty of Islam, the more they watch the debates, the more people criticize, the more it grows. Well, yeah, that's obviously not necessarily true.
And we'll talk about the beauty of Islam a bit later.
Indeed we will. This liar Soko films are paid and trying to stop Mansour from giving dawah to others by keeping him busy asking the same silly questions. Brother Mansour, they're just wasting your time. Ignore this hypocrite paperboy. Don't fall for this trap. Of course, well, there's no, I don't know if there's any evidence that people are being paid for this. And if they are, they're still coming down there and abiding by the rules of Speaker's Corner, which the Muslims do, by the way. So this fellow is a little bit hypocritical. I don't see him challenging Muslims that do that sort of thing. Here we go. This is a beauty. So here's Mufti Monkfish, or Detective Inspector Monkfish otherwise. Kenny Baba, since you keep droning on about how brilliant you are, yes, I would like evidence that I've astronomically underestimated your intelligence. It would be worldview-changing revelation if you could demonstrate that you legitimately have an IQ in the mid-150s or anything approaching that, or if there were any other objective validation of your brilliance. I currently assign this proposition a likelihood lower than the idea that Islam is true, or that the Earth is the center of the galaxy. I just wait for the response. This amuses me. It's brilliant. Mufti Monkfish, I never said that the Earth is this absolute center of the galaxy. Okay. I'll say it at the end. I can't help it. So you're taking my comment out of context. I've already explained it to you. But let's say that I did mistakenly say that Earth is the absolute center of the galaxy, which again, I did. Does one's IQ mean that a person can never make a mistake and should be expected to be correct at all times about all matters, as if all knowing? Of course not. Your efforts to antagonize only demonstrate your lack of reasoning. But hey, who am I to say? You are the atheist. Who? Is there any verifiable evidence of your high IQ or not? Revision. You laugh and chatter at the hissless banter as you chastise without relent. I'll take that as a no. So don't expect me to take
sorry, Rob, can you interpret that? I have no clue what you wrote.
Where? Which part?
Revision. Revision of what?
Where's that?
You laugh and chatter at the hitless. What is hitless
banter? Batter. Maybe it's banter. I don't know what
as you chastise without relent. You laugh and chatter as you chastise. What is chastising? He's not chastising. He's ridiculing. He's not chastising. He's just showing how stupid this is.
Okay, but let me go back a moment here. The reason I was laughing at this, because of course the Earth, the galaxy was not the point. The whole point here is this, he's assigning it as a likelihood. Yes. So this was just and so of course Kenny he got the wrong end of the stick here, and then went into the whole thing about the Earth. That was not Mufti's main point, which is
exactly. So he's not chastising. He's just asking questions, and suddenly he says, "You laugh and chatter as you chastise."
Well, he's asking for evidence of Kenny's self-professed brilliance. And of course,
I don't get what he's trying to do, what he's trying to say. I don't see the deeper meaning here. But then this is just me. I'm just an atheist, you see. I don't know these things.
And plus, you don't have 150 IQ stops, so how can you possibly get it? So.
Yes, I have to drop 50 to get there.
Moving on. So I'll take that as a no. So don't expect me to take your boast seriously. Another atheist fellow, I think, Michael Neiman. This is Facebook, where we can all create our own fiction. It is impossible to verify claims of our intellectual prowess, academic bona fides, or other relevant biographical information. Ultimately, we can only be judged by the strength of our arguments. I thought maybe we'd get a screenshot from an online vanity IQ test, where the real test is whether you took the results seriously. So Mufti he loves sort of this thing. Mufti Monkfish commenting about my IQ is merely a red herring. I don't care any less than I do about you believing anything that I have to say. Seriously, it matters not. And Mufti's got beautiful reply. Was it a red herring when you brought it up in the first place?
Exactly.
Not like we went to go look this up. You made the boastful comment. Most of your comments seem to include the implicit or explicit boast of your own brilliance. That's the only reason why I'm asking for evidence. It was beautiful. Yeah. So, sorry. So that was an exchange between Mufti Monkfish and Kenny again, I think, demonstrating that the 150 IQ may be illusory, just like the belief in Islam. But there we go. Not the belief, but the claims of Islam. Okay, so moving on. This is a bit of a longer one, but I thought this was very useful, because this was Phil talking to Hamza and Imam. If you haven't seen it, it's on Content Over Everything. It's also on EF Dawa's channel in 3 separate parts. And basically, Phil's claim is that science, by his definition, is not just investigating the natural. It can investigate the supernatural as well. And so I'm going to read this, even though it seems long. I'll go through it quite quickly, but I think it's very useful just from a point of understanding this claim. So this Muslim fellow says, Brother Phil is conflating philosophical naturalism with methodological naturalism. Philosophical naturalism is an axiom, first principle, whereas methodological naturalism is an assumption. Every scientist uses methodological naturalism to do science, whether it be an atheist or a theist or atheist. You can't do science if you don't look for a naturalistic explanation. And somebody replied to him, Sean Carroll, who's a scientist, disagrees with you, and quotes Carroll as saying, there is nothing in the practice of science that excludes the supernatural from the start. Science tries to find the best explanation for what we can observe. And if the best explanation is a non-natural one, then that's the one science would lead us to. And so this fellow replied saying, Brother Hamza pinned my comment. It would be beneficial if I explain the terms a little further. He tries to explain a philosophical and methodological naturalism, and then says at the bottom there, and you can read it yourself, I won't read everything. You can also look these up. I'm sure there's a copy and paste, which is all fine. Many atheists conflate the two terms, and this is why they believe condescending towards theists, and say stuff like, why do you use medicine when you're sick? You can just pray to God. They don't understand that methodological naturalism has nothing to do with a personal belief system. So, but I'm going to carry on because the better part comes, but I just wanted to make sure that we got this in, especially with Sean Carroll saying that, as Phil had said, that nothing in principle that stops science from investigating the supernatural, in the sense that if the supernatural has interfered in this universe and created an effect that is non-natural, then science...
This is embarrassing because Phil already explained it to them. This is what I don't understand. How can anybody make this kind of a comment when it has been explained? I don't understand this. This is really, really stupid. Plus the words that I don't understand where he gets this from.
I mean, these are philosophical naturalism and methodological. Is that what you mean? Those words? They're
yes.
Philosophical
they don't
terms that are used.
exclude nature. This is bullshit.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, I think to a degree they seem to point in that direction. It depends which one you use, though.
Philosophical naturalism does not exclude it. It just says we have natural explanations. The point is, if you go and you examine something that somebody claims is supernatural, and you are able to detect it with our methodology that we have today, it automatically becomes part of nature. So it's no longer supernatural.
Yes, there's a bit more involved there. By the way, just at the bottom there, this guy wants to argue that the belief in a creator is a self-evident truth. That I'd love to hear.
This is
that
crazy.
I would love to hear. But of course, that argument's never forthcoming. But let's just finish off here with these ones. So this fellow says the scientist disagrees with you, and here he says science, because this is just a quote. The top bit is just a quote. And so he's responding, science tries to find the best explanations for what we observe, and if the best explanation is non-natural. And he says, what criteria science are going to use to determine what they have observed was non-natural? And then Detective Inspector Monkfist again goes in, wait, did I miss something here? Oh, this is the part. He said, I would like an example of a philosopher of science in that regard, because he disagrees with... He disagrees with Carroll. He says, so what? There are atheist scientists who disagree with Darwinian evolution. Well, I'm not sure they do. Find me an atheist scientist that says common descent is not true.
Some aspects of, yes.
See, this is where people like Sabura are a bit dangerous, because people like this are hoodwinked into believing that there are, in fact, atheists that don't think Darwinian evolution, i.e. common descent, is true. I'd love to find an atheist who doesn't believe that, because if you're not going to believe that, what are you going to believe? I'm not aware of anybody. Again, I hold myself open to somebody pointing out an atheist scientist who says that common descent, the basis of Darwinian evolution, is not true. So I'll be interested in that. They can debate, and they do debate the mechanisms, but the underlying main concept of common descent, I'm not aware of anybody, and we will see that in a moment, I think. I don't think Sean is a philosopher. I'd like an example of philosopher of science. Let me just read this again. I would like an example of a philosopher of science in that regard. Now, the reason I read that to you again like this is the following. So Detective Inspector Monkfish does a lovely long explanation here, and he goes through it. And then he quotes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 scientists who accept this. The view that if you can't do science, if you don't look for a naturalistic explanation, then by your logic, these scientists were not doing science. By your logic, not Phil's. So here he's quoted 12 scientists who agree with Phil and who agree with Sean Carroll, and they're all philosophers.
But so is Sean Carroll. This is false information. Sean Carroll took 2 degrees. One was in philosophy. It was his major.
I thought he'd done some work in philosophy. I wasn't sure that to what degree, because he talks about it in, if you haven't read it, and Phil recommended it, and I'm reading what Phil says, obviously, The Big Picture. It's an interesting book. It goes into Bayesian analysis and many other things, and how we should update our credences and so forth. So how belief works and stuff. Worthwhile listening to. I listened to it a couple of times, or I'm listening to it a couple of times to try and get it to sink in. So The Big Picture by Sean Carroll, if you're interested. So here are the 12 scientists, and then at the bottom, our Muslim friend says, well, you're entitled to your opinions about our era, and he talks about our era. Respectfully, I didn't ask for the names of philosophers. Let's just go back here and check.
Excuse me, that's exactly what he just did.
I would like an example of a philosopher in science in that regard. 12 philosophers, science. Respectfully, I didn't ask for, so either he's got a very short memory or intentionally. I asked for an example of where they proved my assertion wrong. No, you didn't. Okay, so between one comment and another, either his memory is short or he's intentionally being not entirely honest there. And then he goes in, again, Detective Inspector Monkfish goes in here and does a great job. I'll leave it on screen for a second here, because you can always pause the video and read this back again, but I think it's very useful, because here he goes into the examples. Here's 12 such examples. Be more specific about what they actually said. Science does not presuppose naturalism, and supernatural claims are amendable in principle to scientific evaluation. By philosopher Fishman. Clark, there is a strong argument for the conclusion that the supernatural cannot be excluded from science. Clark. Quine, if I saw indirect explanatory benefit in positing sensibilia, probabilia, spirits, a creator, I would joyfully accord them scientific status too, on par with the avowedly scientific positions such as quarks and black holes. And Davies, it is therefore a mistake to say that for science to be science, by definition, it can pursue, identify, and entertain only naturalistic causes. And there's another one there. So there are people who are actually saying this. Nobody's making the claim, by the way, that every scientist agrees with us. And neither was that Phil's claim. His claim was that there are people who disagree that science only does, quote unquote, the natural, investigates the natural. And here's some of the philosophers that agree with him, as well as Sean Carroll. That's the only point. But let's see whether anybody ever takes that up. I wanted to put it on the show. And then again, there's a nice long information here about these sort of things. So if you want to go on to, I think this one is on Content Over Everything's channel. It's about an hour long. It's worthwhile, and you can read some of the comments there, because it's informative as well, I think. So that was the main point.
And it's very easy. I challenge every Muslim to demonstrate the supernatural by taking a piece of tape, slapping a corpse, and seeing if it gets up. If that happens, you have just proven the supernatural. So it's very, very easy. I do not say it is impossible. I'm just saying, go and prove it.
Yeah, but presumably, Stops, I guess, the devil's advocate position would be, it only happened once. So it was a miracle then. Don't expect a miracle to happen all the time.
Okay, but it's hearsay. We don't know if it really happened. This is
Correct,
just somebody saying that it happened. So unfortunately, it doesn't count today. You will need to demonstrate it somehow today. So demonstrate it today, and the case is all yours. You've revolutionized science. It's that easy.
I mean, the common Muslim response to what you just said would be, are you saying it's impossible if it only happens once, and we don't have evidence? Are you saying it's impossible? You atheist?
No, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, give me the evidence, and then I will believe it. Until then, I would remain totally in the middle and say, I don't know. I don't believe it.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It just sounded like when you said it, it's like they should be able to do it today. And I'm only saying what they might respond with. No, we can't do it today, but it happened then once.
Well, I don't know
like
if you know the story with the guy who came back bragging when I was in Rhodos, I was jumping over 2 meters high, and the guy says, well, then show us. Well, I can't do it here, but in Rhodos, I did this. When I was in the Olympics, it was in Rhodos. And there you have a very, very famous Greek proverb, hic salto, hic Rhodos, hic salto, means pretend this is Rhodos, and this is where you jump. If you can't do it, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so that's the end of that sort of comment thread there. And this one is interesting, and this actually comes from a person on our side of the fence, and maybe we can just have a quick. So here's somebody that we know. I'm going to leave it nameless for now. This is an example of how events like Draw Muhammad are fucking stupid. It doesn't do any good for humanity. It just causes reaction responses and more angry people. Peter Singer, the famous utilitarian ethicist, was asked about drawing Muhammad in his discussion with Sam Harris in episode 48, and he surprised me by saying it shouldn't be done. He said the reason is because it doesn't bring about anything good. It leads to deaths and lots of other horrible things. Sam had a go that we should not be bullied into silence by threats of violence, but at the same time, based on the current world situation, I have to agree that this is just dumb fuckery. I have similar thoughts about the Allah is Gay campaign. Lastly, I'd like to add that I agree with our right to draw Muhammad, but I think it's fucking stupid and reckless. I also agree with Waleed that it's a complete waste of time and resources from Imran Khan. Pakistan's problems are not Muhammad's cartoons. Well, obviously, I think we agree there. And then there was something else at the bottom. So this was somebody from our point of view, and I wish he was on the show and we could have that discussion because I obviously disagree with him. Then in the sense that it's stupid, especially in the Western country where you're supposed to have freedom of speech, and it's just drawing a picture. So, and I disagree with whoever that other guy is, Peter Singer. So
Totally.
I think Harris did anyway. It's far bigger than that.
Yes.
And if people are going to die, then this is a slippery slope too. We've got to keep quiet about anything where somebody might lose their life or otherwise be cowered into by violence. So I think there's a far bigger point here from my personal opinion. But this is somebody that is on our side of the fence. And I did invite him, I think, a little while back, but he wasn't around at that stage. But I just wanted to share that just for interest's sake, that there are people that we disagree with on our side of the fence as well. And we could have that. And I bet if he came on here and he had the opportunity, we could go through why we believe that's not true and what he could put which he did in the comments here. So I just wanted to add that because it always seems like it's only Muslims that we bring up. On occasions, I thought that was an interesting comment that I disagreed with from my side of the fence, so to speak. And we could have had that discussion.
Yeah, but you see, it's also sad that we don't have any Muslims coming on here and arguing their case. Why would they say that it is detrimental to do so? Why would it be detrimental to draw Muhammad if we are allowed in a non-Muslim country to criticize anything that we want, to say anything that we want, and you can't stop us from doing anything? Before anybody prohibited it, nobody was interested in doing it. So what is the point in doing something when you know full well this is going to backfire? Why do it? Why go ahead and be so stupid and tell people you're not allowed to do something just because your sentiments, your emotions, and your feelings are being hurt? Doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree. If it was a Muslim majority or a Muslim ruled country, unfortunately, different story. We could argue that point separately. But if that was the case and that was the law in those countries, you have to abide by the law, unfortunately. But in countries where that's not the case, then I agree with you. And the fact that some people are going to get... I have this discussion regularly on private hangouts and stuff with people whenever I pop on. And I've never really had any strong rebuttal to this point of view. Again, maybe we can talk about it later. So this was interesting. Here's this Muslim fellow again. Science is not a criteria to determine the truthfulness of the Quran or Hadith. Science doesn't make truth claims. Science gives workable models which can be falsified. I mean, yes, those two last statements, but science is a criteria to determine how true and this is the thing. This is a thing I see Muslims doing, and I'm sure you've seen it Stops and Abu as well. This whole thing of trying to sidestep science, finding a methodology where they can feel like we can jettison science. Because once you do that, then all we've got is the philosophical arguments. And those often don't have knockdown arguments against them, and so they sort of sit out there and be debated for hundreds of years, and the people on one side think it's strong, the others think it's strong. But with science, there's a much stronger claim, and they're desperate, and Hamza and other people like that are the same, where they want to try and avoid science because it's the biggest obstacle to the Quran being true.
And I make the same comment over and over and over, that these people do not understand. They have no clue. They have no inkling what science actually is. And this is what gets me angry. They have no clue what is going on, and yet the only thing that they can talk about is it's science. Why? Why don't they stay as far away as they possibly can?
Yeah, and I think it's because there's been a collision with the West where, we're looking for good reasons and evidence. and that this collision has been extremely painful and detrimental to Islam, because they've now come across people that, appear to have a better, standard of life and are much more critical of these things. They're not going to just accept this sort of thing, and they're going to bring, the power of science to bear. And this is like, it's like a shock, I guess. And so now they're desperately trying to steer clear of this if they can. It's not working now. Abu, you got anything to say? You've been very quiet there.
Science is not the critical term. Well, I mean, sometimes I would argue that the Qur'an makes kind of testable claims.
Exactly.
That is, so I think sometimes science is the criteria.
Yeah.
For example, the claims that are made in Surah Yasin, for example, about وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرِّ لَهَا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ blah 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 blah, and the sun runs to its resting place, and the moon will not how do you say, like the moon will not
Collide.
Collide, but it will not, like if you're having a racing between two cars, between a BMW and an Audi, and
Catch up,
exactly.
Yeah. And the same with seven heavens and various other things. Phil brought that out in one of his discussions there as well.
Well, look at embryology. Look at the claims embryologists make. Are we made from water? No, we're not.
No.
So now to argue, but from can mean under certain circumstances that other ingredients are also being used, that's a fuck up. That's a train wreck. How can you do that? It says we are made from water. If it says we are made from different ingredients and different portions of different elements, absolutely 100% agreed. But it's exactly what Abu says. These statements, these claims in the Quran come from different areas of science. So you have claims from geology, for example, the mountains, from oceanography, for example, the barriers in the water, and that it's dark underwater, and all this bullshit, which are scientifically based claims. And you can use science to determine whether they're correct or not. And science is true when you are taking it in the context. I mean, you can't use a hammer to go and I don't know, to draw on glass. It doesn't work. So if you take the wrong tool for the wrong job, it doesn't work. So you need to use science the way that it is intended, and that is to determine reality. So it is, doesn't make truth claims. No, it doesn't make any claims regarding truth. It is the truth when you are looking at it in the context of naturalism, and that's it.
I think there's often a conflation as well, because I think we'll all agree that science can. There's mistakes that have been made, or things that have been believed on perceived good evidence at the time where we've had to revise the view. But this for them seems to be a weakness, which obviously for us is a strength. And then they want to, of course, jump over to philosophy. Say, well, hey, science is not 100% philosophically true. Well, nobody's claiming it is, so that's a red herring.
Yeah.
Nobody's claiming.
Who found out that? But who found out that these scientific claims were actually false?
Correct.
It was never a religious person. It was always scientists who found this out.
Correct.
So science is self-correcting.
Correct. Yeah. But nobody's claiming that science is absolute. We're claiming it's reliable.
Exactly.
And things like the Earth going around the sun, that is as much of a scientific fact. At that point, I'm not interested in whether it's 100% philosophically true. In other words, could you possibly be wrong and be a brain in the vat? I'm not interested. By that stage, we're done. If that's the route you go, don't waste my time. Okay,
you're Islamophobic.
Yeah, I mean, there are
scientophobic.
Where we don't yet know, but certain things, as far as humanly possible, we've got, we know those to be true, justified true belief or reliably produced true belief, as Ozzy would say. Right, moving on. Okay, so before I do this one, I'm going to share with you now a few comments, and I'm going to drop the bombshell at the end of this. So I'm not going to read all of these, but I'm going to read a few of these, and hopefully this will be a precursor, meaning something for a future show. But I'll let you know at the end. So I'm just going to read a few of these comments. And I want to make clear before I go to these comments that, again, the person that posted this was clear to say that he's read comments from Christians and atheists that are also unpleasant. I'm not sure quite to this degree. But again, and this doesn't reflect all Muslims, but I'm going to read some of these comments, and then I'll tell you what they're related to. So, fake ex-Muslim, most likely a monkey worshipping Hindu. You left your country, went to America, and put on makeup, and you look ugly without it already, and start to say this about Islam religion. Do you think people believe the shit you say? You are a bitch, even you can't speak English right. That's hypocritical. This bitch sounds so attention-seeking. Cake face, dumb slag. This bitch is making shit up just for YouTube. You sucking different cocks, you weak inside. Islam is perfect, but people like you are not. Stop being so proud without leaving. You just silly cost. Mimsy vid, you prostitutes, etc., etc. Filthy liar, bitch, undercover fake Muslim, etc. And this goes on. You fucking rats. You are one thing, you are a hoe. You are not Muslim, never was. You Hindu faking. Burn in hell forever, foolish psycho. Fuck this bitch. The devil's children, not humans. Here it carries on. She must be burned in hell. Eat shit, you dog, because you blah, blah. I think she's lying. You took a drug addict and sex friend. Satan has taken over you. Look at you, you whore. I don't see an ex-Muslim. I see a thought, whatever a thought is. Who's this ugly whore? And so let me just say to you, these were all comments on one video from Mimsy Vids. I think it is. I think I've done it correctly. So she's the partner of Video Vids. And these were all taken off a single video. Now, if you go watch Mimsy's videos, she's lighthearted, she's full of energy. You know, she'll question Islam and critique it in whatever degree. But she's nowhere near sort of maybe Stopspamming or anybody that's even more out there, Christian Prince or whoever it is. And this is the sort of comments. And one wonders whether this is also because she's a woman. And this is the sort of vitriol that's out there. I don't know whether, in fact, Christians and atheists would say this. I think
it is partly because she's a woman, but I'm also sometimes I'm kind of astonished how like over the top and like overwhelming the reactions sometimes are. But
a lot of it's sexual, isn't it? So everything that they could think of that's bad in Islam, they will throw it at somebody, whoever that person is.
Yeah,
like as if gay is a problem for us in the West. No, it's not. So
I mean, I have kind of two theory or hypotheses. Like, either this is like only like kind of social shaming and things like that, like either to stop say what they say or do what they do, back to the fold. But another kind of hypothesis is that it's like they don't understand. It's that their brain kind of turns off and then they just everything's just come out without their any like noticing.
But also notice that all of these comments are ad hominems. At not one point here does anybody bring up anything substantive against what she's actually said.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah. That maybe speak for the first hypothesis, that it's only a kind of over the top social shaming in order to get you back to the.
But I think it's also a case of like shock, because in some of these people's communities and countries and so forth, women would never dare do this. They'd get beaten to a pulp or killed or arrested or something. And so here's a woman who's, celebrating, her freedom and so forth. And this is just unbelievable to these people, some of these people. And again, this is not all Muslims, but whoever these people are. And so it's like what they can't do physically comes out in words, and you can just see it here. So this is like, if there were violent words, if these words could come to life, these people, I'm sure, would pay plenty to have somebody else do some of the things that they want here, which is
it's probably three. When I think about it, it's probably like one is to shame the person, so they do what they kind of manipulation. The other factor is the shock, because it's so far away from the society that they live in and their norms. And what was the third part? I forgot the third part.
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Again,
I just see this obsession just with this dirty sex. They are so obsessed with sex and gay sex and things like that half the comments are only around this one topic. It's absolutely frightening how obsessed they are with this.
Yeah. But I think I kind of see this behavior also like maybe not quite this language, but even in the West, when someone have a kind of political opinion that deviates from the norms, you can also see this over-the-top reaction.
But again, I think we can improve the Quran with one sentence. I say to you, my brethren, my followers, my brothers and sisters, if somebody decides to leave Islam, let them be, wish them well, and know that God will be judging them, and you are never to take action against them. Boom, we're done. Do we find that in the Quran? No. It's so easy to improve this. Now you have to go look for somebody's interpretation that says it's okay to be an ex-Muslim. And that's only in the West. It's not okay to be an ex-Muslim in many of these countries. So again, I think that brings us to the end of these. Yes, we're back at the tan one there. So there we go. Welcome, James. Good evening. How are you, my good sir, before we carry on?
Welcome, Rob and Stops and Abu Mohid. Yeah, it's I'm doing well. Hope you guys are doing well.
Yes, indeed. I was impressed with your discussion with Darren Hamza. Obviously, you were bringing up many things, but obviously what I think most of us consider one of the knockdown arguments anyway, with the inheritance. I know you want to move on to other things as well, but I was very fascinated by how he tried to steer the conversation. And I think, James, if you look back on it as well, people don't realize it's different on video when you're looking at something. When you're there live, and I don't know, you comment as well, there's a different atmosphere. Hamza's got this kind of a bullying, authoritarian sort of approach to it. And he's got his mates standing there and stuff. He really does it on his own anyway, which would be, I think, a different story. But I think it's different that most people don't understand when they look at the video. And then it's, you kind of have to deal with it in a way. And I thought you did that admirably, but and I think you eventually got there, but in the beginning he was very hesitant to go towards the Quran and sort of went off on other topics and challenged, on the history of Muhammad. I don't care if I know nothing about Muhammad. He has a claim in the book. If you believe the claim is true, I want to investigate the claim. That's all. I don't care about the history. So, maybe you can speak about that briefly before we carry on.
Yes, I don't think he's that bad compared to some of the other sort of high-profile speakers at Speaker's Corner. Like in terms of, for example, interrupting or other kind of topics. Like, yeah, he does a bit, but like not as bad as some people. And so, but yeah, he definitely had like a very particular kind of let's talk about whether Muhammad has a good motive to lie, and that's the only thing he wanted to talk about, and it was a little bit silly, and like I think kind of he could tell that he was kind of like losing the crowd, because like I was saying, no, we don't need to know what his motive was. If I can show that there's a claim in this book which isn't true, and therefore like it's unreasonable to believe that this book is from God, then that would show that either he's lying or he's making it up or via some other kind of conscious means, and so yeah, it was all right. I kind of like fumble my words a bit, but I always do that, so it's all good fun.
Yeah, I think the only thing I noticed is it seemed to me, sort of pushed you in the direction of because he's got his own thing in his mind. And Phil sort of highlighted this as well. And he tried to push you there that Muhammad's a liar. And you sort of seemed to at one point accept that he was kind of a liar. And really, we don't need to go there, because then he thinks he's got a knockdown argument. Hey, he was truthful. All these people, everybody thought he was truthful. Therefore, he's truthful. And he thinks he's got a knockdown argument against him being a liar. So he tries to push it towards a liar. But all we have to say, and I think you might have said it at some point anyway, is that he was mistaken. That's all we need to say. And then the rest, because he's got all these options. He must have been this, he must have been that, he must have been that. And clearly he leaves out the most reasonable one, which is he was mistaken.
But even his claims that Muhammad wasn't a liar aren't that strong at all, because you can find evidences in the Quran, like kind of book 66, Surah At-Tarim, where he kind of like God reveals to him like that God is angry with his wife for some little petty domestic disputes that turns out to either be about kind of eating honey in inverted commas, or what actually probably was the case, that he kind of had sex with one of his slaves during one of the wife's days without telling her, and there are other examples like of him being called a liar, and Darren was using kind of evidence of like Muhammad's good character in inverted commas from Sirah, from biographies, And so if you're going to use Sirah, then there's plenty of other kind of incriminating stuff from the Sirah. And if you're going to use like Hadith, there's plenty of other incriminating stuff from the Hadith. You just need to like prepare your stuff. And I mean, I didn't like prepare that particular topic because I didn't know he was going to go there. But you can't defend. I don't think you can defend Muhammad on any sort of body of evidence at all, really. But yeah, so it was fun.
Good. Welcome to Thunderous as well. How are you, my good sir?
Hi, guys.
Are you well? Abu just wanted to bring in the third factor there, talking about
it's
those
important,
present comments.
So what I think maybe another factor is why they are using this cursing language and so on is because they have a kind of social anxiety, and by cursing her this much, he is signaling to the rest of this in-group that he is virtuous. So it's kind of virtue signaling. I think it is the same thing. Sometimes when you look at videos of SJWs when they do these kind of things, they seem to be almost psychotic. And I actually think that they have so strong social anxiety that they're over-the-top virtue signaling by screaming racist, sexist, fascist, misogynistic, blah, 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 that this is a way of them to deal with their own social anxiety. And I think maybe Muslims, by calling her a whore and all these things, are doing the same thing. Not important.
Yeah.
When you consider the Quran, now they're not following Allah's example as well, because he seems to rant a lot for not accepting him. So when I'm speaking to Muslims, I find that they're using a stronger tone, but the mindset and attitude is no different to the Allah that they follow, in as much that if you can't accept it with any rational argument, then that's when the vitriol comes out. And it's no different to what I read in the Quran. I mean, I think I forget where the surah is, but where Allah claims that non-Muslims are the worst of creatures. It doesn't matter what kind of language you want to use when the God who's supposed to be the creator of the universe is saying you're lesser than a dung beetle. You know, I think that's the example they're following.
Yes, exactly. James, what's your thoughts on particularly on those comments? Have you got any thoughts on particularly the one towards Mimsy?
I've only just come back just now, so I missed most of the show, so I probably kind of can't contribute very much on the topic.
Cool. All right, no worries. Welcome to TJ as well. TJ, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, all good. I'm guessing you've heard the show. Have you got any thoughts on the comments, particularly in the Mimsy one, before we move into stops and sort of the main topic of the show?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, typical, people who get pissed off because somebody insulted their religion, and instead of countering them with facts and with data and stuff like that, they just counter with insults, which is not a counter argument. So it's just waste of time, honestly.
Yeah, I'm just surprised by the vitriol of it as well.
But don't you find that people are like that when you have a discussion with them, and it's particularly on something that they claim to have a knowledge or an experience of, and they find that the person that's coming with the opposing argument seems to have more knowledge, experience, and has done more research, and that's where the ad hominem attacks come from, because it's not so much the argument that you're putting forward, it's the fact that you know more than they do on a subject that they claim to be a specialist on, or what their faith is based on.
Exactly. Yes, and you notice that with James. So when James goes down there, you notice with Darren Hamza, with of course Adnan, the other Tubby Teddy Bear Muslim. I can't remember his name. Harun, I think. All of this is to try and discredit James, because they can't discredit the information. There it is in plain sight. They can try and tap dance around it, and of course they'll be caught out. But one of the tactics is to try and discredit the person. And you heard it with Phil as well. One of the parts there with Phil, with Hamza, says, "Oh, Phil, about the seven heavens, where did you get this from? You most likely got this from an anti-Islamic website. Go to Answering Islam, I think it is." And Phil goes, "Oh, I've been there. I've looked at it. That's not good information." It's as if wherever you got the information from is suspect. There, the poisoning of the well. Therefore, the information itself you can't even comment on it because it must be wrong because you went to an anti-Islamic website, as if that somehow makes the information more wrong or something, you know. So there's all these tactics that are being used, and I think it's useful for us to highlight this to viewers, because first-time viewers or people who are only watching this for the drama and stuff, hopefully they'll get a sense of what is going on here, because it's obviously intellectually dishonest, but it's not easy to point out if you or to view if you're not practiced at watching what's going on here. I want to welcome Waiso as well. So Waiso, good evening, how are you?
I'm well, yourself?
Yeah, very good. So I'm going to bring everybody in, but I want stops now before we carry on, otherwise it'll get late. So the title was an Imam almost assaulted Stop Spamming for asking a question. So I'm going to hand it over to Stops now, who's going to tell us a fascinating story recently that happened to him. And I thought this was interesting and indicative, and we can then discuss this, and it'll go from there. So Stops, over to you, my good sir.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's that fascinating.
Mike, Stops.
I don't think it's that. Thank you. I don't think it's is that fascinating. I think it's rather embarrassing, and in my eyes, at least, it shows how desperate Muslims are at the moment, especially if they're not in a Muslim majority country, especially if they're out of their normal environment, if they are being confronted by what is going on in reality in the 21st century. So this was in Germany, and on the 3rd of October, there's this national holiday, the German Reunification Day, and the Muslims have decided that they're going to make it the day of the open mosque or something like this. Now, I'm always told, well, why don't you go to Muslims? If you want to know something, don't go to Fox News, don't go to blah, 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 just take it from the Muslims. So I got it from the Muslims in the Middle East. And then people still say, yeah, but now you are no longer in the Middle East. Why don't you go and get it from Imam? Well, I went to Imam, and he talked absolute bullshit. So I went to the mosque here. And I asked them some questions, and I found some people there, and I said, okay, how do you young Muslims handle the 21st century in Europe? How do you handle this? And the people were saying, well, it's very easy, because we have our guideline, which is the Quran. And I said, yeah, but what happens if the Quran were to say 1 + 1 = 3? Would you question the Quran, or would you question reality? And they said, we will not question the Quran. And I said, well, how do you manage to get this all together, reality today and the Quran and all the different mistakes and all the inconsistencies and all these things? And they would not comment. And they said, come back when the Imam is here, come back on the 3rd of October. So that's what I did. 3rd of October, went there. And I went and attended a lecture on how wonderful and beautiful and brilliant Islam is, and did the show of the mosque. And it's a large mosque, okay? And all the rooms, and where they do the tuition, the teaching of young pupils, and how they teach Arabic and things like that, and how they are like a community center for all the people who come there. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Well, what happens, you, for example, as a lady now, what happens if I come to you and I want to shake your hand? And she says, well, yeah, it's a little bit of a problem, but now here I do accept it because it's the standard. And I said, well, you greeted us with the Islamic greeting of Assalamu alaikum, but what happens if somebody comes to you with a German greeting of shaking hands? Well, yeah. And she was sort of, but in the end, I accept it. So I said, okay, so you accept these things. What about then about the text? Do you accept those as well? No comment. Go speak to the Imam. I said, well, where is this Imam? Well, he's downstairs because now they're praying, and now they will be out in 10 minutes. Okay. So I go downstairs again, and here comes the Imam. Small little guy, but he doesn't speak German. Okay, so they got some guy from Turkey. I don't know who pays him. And he's standing there smiling, and that's it. He just speaks Arabic, and he speaks some Turkish, but no German. But he's got some guys around him. Now what happens is these guys say, okay, we hear that you have a question. I said, yes, this is a question that nobody so far has been able to answer. So what I'd like to know from you is, if we are in the 21st century and we have all this internet, all the information available to us, how does it work for Muslims? Are they allowed to get this information? And how do you handle this information, and what do you teach these young people? Because I was told today in the lecture and here during the tour that you have rooms where you provide tuition for Muslims. And he said, yes. I said, okay, how do you treat this topic? How do you handle this when it comes to the various inconsistencies, all the contradictions and the blatant errors in the Quran? And I thought, well, he's going to say, here we go, and what we do is we look at them and we challenge them and da. But this guy went apeshit. He started throwing his fists at me, and then his sidekick started shouting at me. He says, I am the I don't know, the spokesperson for the so and so gremium of this and this council, and I am the representative in the whatever environment for these people and in this group, and I am this. And I said, well, so what? You know, I'm asking a question. I didn't ask you for your credentials. I've asked you a question. How do you handle this? Can you answer the question or not? If you don't want to answer it, then just let me know. And this seems to really have got him off, because now he stuck his finger almost up my nose, and he was waving his hands, and then I could see literally froth building in his mouth, how he was screaming at me, calling me a liar, calling me all sorts of names because I asked this question. And he said, you don't have anything, you don't know what you're talking about. I studied Islam. I said, well, so have I. So what? You know, we just have a difference in opinion here. I can show you a mistake in the Quran if you want. I mean, you know, what would you like me to do? If you go to chapter 2, sentence 1, this is an inconsistency. You don't understand what it says. Only Allah knows. So you are trusting a book that you don't even understand. So you are telling me that you are getting guidance from a book you don't know what it says. The second thing is, if you want a mistake, well, just go to chapter 4, go sentences 11, 12, and 176, go and look at the inheritance, go and add it all up. There's a mistake there. It doesn't work. Yes, but you can do this, but you can proportion this. I said, okay, what does it say in the Quran? Show me in the Quran. Poof! And now he went totally ballistic, and he went and threw his fists at me, and 3 guys had to sit down. They had to like carry him out of there to leave me alone. He went totally apeshit. He was screaming, and everybody was standing around there, and I was just smiling gracefully. I didn't do anything. And then when they took him out, I tell you, he was still screaming out there in the car park. It was absolutely brilliant. And then what was interesting, a lady next to me was sort of leaning against the table, and she looked at me, and then she sort of cocked her head and said, you like provoking people, don't you? And I smiled and I said, oh, sure I do. Absolutely I do. And I said, but then the thing is, everybody should be able to handle this, because all I did is ask a question, how Muslims handle this. And she says, well, what did you ask? I said, that's all I asked. She says, and he went ballistic because of that? I said, yes. He says, but the answer is very easy. And she and she gave me, you know, some explanation, and this was great. So now I was in a conversation with her, and now others joined in, and all of a sudden I was surrounded, and it was all females. I don't know why. All of a sudden I had like 6 or 7 females, and they wanted to know, okay, why am I investing?
Your aftershave stops.
It must be pheromones or something. No. It was just that they just happened to come along and they heard this, and I think this was the female curiosity, as opposed to men who were afraid that I was going to challenge them. And then they asked me questions, and they realized that I was reasonable, that I was just asking questions which anybody could answer, which anybody was entitled to ask, and there was nothing wrong with that. And that this was brilliant. And then I had people, and then they left, and then an old lady came, and she said, yeah, but what is wrong with you? How can you ask this question? I said, there's nothing wrong with it. How do you answer this question? Yeah, but we know that in the Quran there is nothing wrong, and we know that even doctors and embryologists and everybody said that everything is correct in the Quran. I said, lady, if that is what you believe, if that is at the center of your belief, if that is the way that you test your belief, then I feel sorry for you. because none of that is true. So you need to acknowledge that we live in the 21st century. We know what is true and what is not. And if you base your belief on science and on doctors telling you something, there is something wrong with your belief. So anyway, that was the whole story. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was really funny the way that this guy went totally ballistic because he could not answer a question, because it strikes at the heart of Islam at the moment, where we have so many Muslims in the 21st century realizing there's something wrong here. And this is why so many are leaving. And I think this is just indicative of what happened there last Wednesday.
But Stops, what about the part that you talked about where the lady said something and you said, thank goodness you know, to her daughter that you've got this, her for a mother?
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the girls happened to, you know, she asked me a question and I saw the external likeness, and I said, and because now this lady was talking to somebody else and the younger girl was asking me something, and then I answered this and blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, is this lady your mother? And she said, yes. And I said to her, wow, you must be very proud of her because she's a wonderful woman. Now, this girl was so totally flabbergasted because in her eyes, her mother had just set me right, had just told me that there is an answer to my question, how Muslims handle this. And now I am telling her that her mother is fantastic, that I could see the disbelief in her eyes, how I was semi-flirting with her mother through her, telling her that her mother was great when her mother had just told me that I'm an idiot. But that's not the point. I did not go there to trigger anybody. I did not go there to expose anybody. I just wanted to know what they teach and what they say about these things. The same thing as I went to Mishka and I said to them, listen, guys, do you really teach that there is anything of scientific whatever in there? And they said no. So they will not allow this. Where this guy Kenny, he said yes, he heard this from Mishka. So this is also hypocritical, where they are saying on the one hand no, we don't, but internally they do. So in the mosque, when I asked them what is it that you teach the people, they are too afraid to say what they are actually teaching people. And this, I think, is quite worrying in my eyes anyway, if we can't go to a mosque and get an honest answer.
I think what struck me, and then I want to bring in everybody in the panel here as well, what struck me was that this was, you know, a mosque in Germany. This was not, you know, somewhere where somebody could point the finger that, oh, these are not real Muslims, or, you know, these are, you know, backward people or whatever. This is in Germany, you know, in the 21st century. And the response was certainly emotion and potentially violence from the Imam. This wasn't even his followers. This was from him directly. And you weren't even insulting Muhammad or Allah or anything like that.
Can I ask?
This is a good point, yeah.
Can I ask which town was it?
Sorry?
Can I ask which town in Germany was this?
No comment.
No comment, okay.
Let's open it up to the panel. So based on
mosque looked very much like this, very similar.
Can I ask,
please,
what was it, did you initially go to the mosque just on a normal day, or was it a kind of special kind of visitors please come in and ask questions type of event?
Well, I went twice. The first time was after Friday prayer, and then the other one was when they said to me, we'll come back on the 3rd when we have the full panel here, because in Germany, mosques are companies, okay? So they are like clubs. And then they had the speaker, and they had the spokesperson, and they had the board members and everybody there. And this is why there were so many people around this Imam, because it wasn't actually the Imam himself who went and then tried to assault me. It was actually the board, who's it, the speaker or the I don't know what you call him. He's not the president, I suppose. Anyway, the main guy in the mosque, who was in all these groups all throughout Germany and throughout Europe, and who's so important in the Muslim community. And I am asking him a question like that. So it was twice.
Okay. And did you get the impression that it was just the most senior Imam who couldn't speak any German, or did it seem like, you know, several of the staff involved in teaching and preaching kind of couldn't actually speak German?
Oh, there's several there. Absolutely. Yes, you're right. It's not only him. A lot of this is Arabic courses. There are a lot of German-speaking people there, and there's a lot of educated people there as well. Because I spoke to some people who came from, yes, I can't remember what country it was. It wasn't Pakistan. It wasn't Bangladesh. I can't remember. Somewhere. And they had studied, and they were now doing a postgraduate course in Germany in German. They spoke impeccable German, but they were going to go back to their country as Muslims. Yeah.
Do you think it's likely that during a kind of, I don't know what you call it, like a sermon or like a drama, that many of the younger audience, like a considerable fraction of the younger audience, wouldn't actually understand what was being said because they only speak German and not Arabic or Turkish, but still just attend?
Yes.
Goodness.
Yeah. But then for them, this is the same thing as me saying abracadabra and blah 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 blah. This is it's magic words. For them, this is something that they repeat, which they don't understand, because you need to appreciate ancient Arabic is different than the modern standard Arabic we have around today. And even today, we have different dialects in Arabic. So the ancient, the Quranic, the I don't know what you want to call it, Old Arabic is quite different in certain words. Abu, I think, will be able to explain, how different it really is.
Well,
Therefore,
it depends on it depends where you're from. It's no dialect, modern dialect is exactly like classical Arabic, Fusha. But some are closer. So if you go to like Morocco, their dialect is almost unintelligible. I mean, I understand some words, but it's mixed with a lot of French words and things.
Exactly, and this is the point, because you cannot speak classic or ancient or Quranic Arabic. It's a dead language. You need to study it. And the funny thing is only 0.0, okay, 000, so 0.0001% of Muslims have studied ancient Arabic.
I don't know. Well, look, most Arabs, if you speak to them in classical Arabic, they will understand pretty much what you're saying. Maybe they can't speak it themselves, but you have like channels like Al Jazeera, for example. So it's a bit like Latin, with the only exception. Maybe it's a bit like Latin was in the end days of Roman Empire or something. I don't know. Or maybe it's like it was in it's hard to explain, but most Arabs, especially Arabs that come from the actual Middle East, they understand when you speak classical Arabic, but not all of them can speak it themselves, or they can speak it a little bit and things like that. It's hard to give an exact example.
Would you say your example would be like, if you could speak Urdu, you can speak Hindi as well, or if you speak Urdu, you've got a good understanding of what the other dialects and tongues are around in the Indian, Punjab, and Pakistan areas?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Urdu, but maybe it's like Uzbekistan and Turkish.
I put that question forward because Urdu and Arabic use the same alphabet in the way that it's written, but obviously the language is
no, but like modern Arabic language use the exact same alphabet. Like Farisi, Persian, they use almost the same, but they have a little. It's a bit like you have English letters, and in Scandinavia we use the English letter and added some dots on the O and the A and so on. So it's a bit similar with Persian.
But now that you mentioned it, it was actually quite funny, because then somebody else said to me, yeah, but you said that the ALM and the HM and those letters, they don't make any sense. I said, well, do they make sense? He says, yes, because they remind us that the Quran is written in the Arabic alphabet.
Mm-hmm. How does that remind you? Some words that you can't understand reminds you that it's written in Arabic.
Thank you. So exactly. Nobody understands it, but this was his comment.
Let's bring in TJ and YSO on this. Go ahead.
So up until that point, the entire Quran was revealed in Arabic, and the Arabs at that time needed to be reminded of that fact. Is that what we're saying here?
Yes.
Okay. So just want to clarify.
Okay, Waiso, do you want to comment on what you've heard, and then we want to welcome in Vidu, and Vidu straight after Waiso. Please share some thoughts on what you've heard. Over to you, Waiho.
Well, I mean, I've learned Spanish as I've gotten older, working around Spanish-speaking people, and you know, it's funny because I watched The Godfather like 2 months ago, and they're speaking Italian, but I was able to follow along quite well with the Italian words just because of the Spanish. You know, the Latin languages tend to correlate pretty well. But what I would say is the classical Arabic can be learned or whatnot. It's just that the Qureshi dialect is a dead dialect. It's not used in everyday vernacular. And then there's even a guy, Sam Garens, who's a Quranist, and he learned Arabic from doing it himself and putting all the words into context and every time that they've ever been used inside the Quran, and then like compiling a table and then putting it all together. And he's even said on his one of his videos that there's Muslims that are fluent in Arabic that will admit that there are words inside the Quran that they do not know, that they cannot give you a true definition of, that is just you have to take it as allegedly what you think it means.
Yeah, I think that's a big claim.
But look, the thing is with that is that there are old, very, very old books that explain the wordings in the Quran. So,
but where do they get the meanings from, Abu? Doesn't matter how old they are.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, they live just like not that long after the fact.
Well, just to say an example that he always likes to give, Sam Garens, is salat, which salat in classical Arabic actually means when the second horse is following the lead horse. And that's what it really means in classical Arabic. Or you could look at how the word that they translate for abrogation actually doesn't mean abrogation. It means the copying of a book. So that's the big problem with Arabic, in my opinion. It doesn't want to expound upon itself. That's the reason the same word for ant, actually they've made it become the word for atom also. Now the word ant and atom are two totally different things. What? But if you keep your language simple enough, then you can make it where all these words allegedly came from Allah and cover a vast number of things.
What word is that?
I can look it up. It's even in Al-Tabari, where the guy who does the footnotes, he says that it's the word ant and dust and atom are all correlated. And you can look it up inside the Quran, that there are verses inside the Quran where there's different translations where ant is actually atom, or where a speck of dust is actually translated as atom. So this isn't something I'm just coming up with. This is something that I've read.
Could it be dharra?
I mean, I don't know Arabic, so I couldn't tell you the exact word. But
I think the main point, though, is that it's unclear, isn't it? I mean, you know, again, it goes back to the original point. If this is supposed to be from an omniscient, all-powerful God, that's a clear, concise, and complete and error-free message for all of mankind, then it's evidence against that, as I think you kind of made clear. I want to bring in Vidu. So Vidu, good evening. Welcome to you, sir. You've talked. Have you been on from the beginning, or how much have you heard so far?
Hi guys. How's it going? Can you hear me?
Good, yes, coming through clearly.
Lovely. Hope everyone as well. Thanks for having me on. I've been listening probably for the last 5 minutes, but I think I said it's correct. Like, if this is from God, and that he would have, spoke in a way that does not make things harder to understand, but easier to understand. And simply blaming human beings, oh, they don't speak Arabic anymore. And listen, God knows this, so God doesn't really have any excuses.
Of course not.
If I said that I'm going to write a manual for the rest of humanity to follow, I have to factor in the reality. Human beings' language evolves. That people may not learn Arabic the way may not learn the language that I wrote it in. That can evolve, and the fact that most Muslims aren't even Arab, like these are all excuses. If God knows everything, He has to take everything into account. Unless you're saying God is so short-sighted that He doesn't take these things into account and acted almost hastily. About this is obviously a religion for that place and that time, which has done very well militarily and economically, that has spread across from Morocco to Indonesia. But this whole the language is amazing, and I'm just not buying it.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. While I've got you on here, by the way, you didn't hear it, but I read out some of those rather disgusting comments that were made to your lovely wife that Hassan posted on Facebook. And yeah, I just wanted to get your comment. Obviously, it's personal to you. I appreciate that. But hey, what did she say, or what did she think, or what did you think when you see some of this? And these were only comments on a single video, by the way.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. To be honest, I mean, I've sort of seen all sorts of comments posted on my channel, and of course, my wife Mimsy has seen. I mean, this just comes with the territory. We're gonna say some really nice stuff and some really bad stuff, but just the level of sort of disgusting comments I've seen come my wife's way. I don't know if it's because she's a female and certain people cannot handle the fact that she's a female and that she's actually Islam, which kind of makes it doubly worse. So they sort of, you're a whore, just like sexual, all that kind of stuff, that sexual stuff, which to me reflects more badly on them. This is the irony, that they think that because if I say she's a whore, she becomes a whore. No, you yourself have exposed how low you are in your own sort of ethics and morality. But me and my wife leave these comments up there because people think that Muslims don't abuse people online. I've heard some people say, "Oh, Muslims don't give any hate comments; they always receive them." So we leave it there so people can see for themselves.
Yes, and actually we mentioned that. We did actually mention that, which was the part about her being a woman, etc., leaving, feel confident, and in their world, this has just not happened. Women need to, be subservient and stay at home and or do whatever they're told, etc. And so here you have a woman that's not like that. And I think if she was in one of those countries, her life would be in peril. And this is the response because they can't reach her, can't get to her. So the vitriol comes out in the written word. One last thing, and then I'm going to pass it over to the panel. Can we have her on at some point? Since I've got you here, could you speak nicely to your lovely lady? We'd love to have her on as a sole guest, as an ex-Muslim. We can just chat to her. We've had Lily and we've had a couple of others. Obviously, I love having ex-Muslims in particular. So you and I can chat afterwards. But if you could speak nicely to her, we'd love to have her on.
Yep, I've already told her on because it's
you're telling her, good man.
Yes, I
know
am
what to do,
exerting my patriarchal role in the household, stamping my foot down and saying, "Lady, this is your first warning."
Get out of the kitchen and onto that laptop.
Sorry?
Get out of that kitchen and onto the laptop.
Yeah. Don't you think
that
these comments are actually a reflection of the helplessness and the absolute impotence that people have, that they cannot address the claims, they cannot address anything factual. They have to go to this level. In the case of a girl, you address the sexuality, and in the case of a guy, you go into violence. Isn't that a plain reaction which shows how incompetent and how helpless they are?
Yeah, I mean, this is I find like the moment anyone does not address the argument, does not address facts or whatever, and goes straight onto "you look like this" or "you're a whore, you're ugly," and that for me is you've lost. straight away. I don't care who you are, or even let's say, for example, if I'm wrong, if you were to resort to that kind of argument, then you are wrong because you could have really taught me a few things by sticking to the facts, sticking to the arguments. But if you want to play this insult game, this is for me a sign of desperation, and they have really shown their desperation. Sort of dark insults, rape, sexual violence, all that kind of stuff. So like I said, we leave it up there. We leave these comments up there to show people this is the kind of stuff we get. So yeah, I agree.
By the way, Vidu, it was a very interesting chat with you and Mimsy and Imtiaz that you put up,
Yes.
up recently. Yeah, Imtiaz is great. You guys are great too.
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate that because I think we were just having a chat, like being normal human beings, and a lot of actually, I think my wife was reading some comments from some Muslims. These guys actually aren't that bad. You know what? You ain't. You know what? We thought you were bad, but you know what? You're not too bad. It's okay. It's okay. People that listen, we are real Muslims. Like we still even love some Muslim songs or whatever it is, like from our childhood or whatever it is, and we're just normal human beings. The only difference is that we've come to a different conclusion, personal hatred towards any Muslim. And that human side does make a difference in the whole conversation, you know. So yeah, I'm thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Hey, I had a little question for
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I had a little question based on kind of Stopspamming's anecdote before about him being attacked by an imam in Germany for asking kind of a question at a kind of sort of meet and greet kind of session, and it was like given that given that sort of Muslims who actually understand Arabic, even if it's modern Arabic, will be able to understand the Quran. Like, you know, they'll be able to understand it pretty well. Like, I guess the same way as I'd be able to understand Shakespeare or like really old English. Given that, you know, those people who actually speak Islam as a mother tongue will actually understand it. Do you think there's kind of a difference in the mindset of kind of those Muslims who actually kind of were born in an Arabic-speaking country, and, for example, Muslims who were maybe born in, say, Pakistan, where the sermons will often be given kind of in Arabic, and they'll just read out the Quran in Arabic without really understanding it? Like, do you think that produces a kind of big difference in sort of the actual levels of understanding, or kind of do you think that produces a difference?
Oh, absolutely. But it may be true for many other Muslims out there, is that when I was growing up, obviously I don't speak Arabic, I'm not Arab, I'm from a background. You go into mosque and the first in Arabic, so everyone's kind of looking at each other like we don't know what's going on. Really deep message, okay? And then of course the second half is in English or do whatever it is. But I think for non-Arab speaking countries or people who are Muslim, they almost deify the Arabic language. So even if they don't understand what's being said, something very profound, it must be something very poetic and so on and so forth. And you'd hear a lot of non-Arabic speaking Muslims defend Arabic and say, oh, it's like the best language, it's this miracle, that miracle. I'm like, guys, do you even speak? What are you talking about?
Look, can I
and I think sorry, hello?
No, can I just add to it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think there are reasons for why classical Arabic is kind of special. I think it's for the same reason why Sanskrit is special, because it's.
I'm not denying that ancient languages have maybe like you know, old English
but
or
it's
Sanskrit.
Not only that it's ancient. It's also like, how do I explain? Like it's like the kind of the intellectual elite of that day, kind of purifying a language into this kind of. So it's kind of
like I said, I can't say Arabic or isn't miraculous because I don't know Arabic. So if Arabic, I can't say either way. But yet you'd find, like, would a Muslim defend Sanskrit in the same way? No, they have no reason. So this is so that's the point I was trying to make. And people who understand like Arabic, they will like who at least can understand, maybe not 100%, will have a better understanding than someone who just knows the Quran because the Imam told them this means this, and that's the end of that. How on earth is some guy in Pakistan going to understand understand the Quran if he only knows Urdu or Punjabi? The best thing he can read is translations, or his Imam told him so. But then we get into the
argument. Learn languages. It's through translations if it's not your mother tongue. That's the argument I've always had with people.
I get into a lot of Muslims say, oh, but you haven't read the... So your opinion of it, like the vast majority of Muslims who are Muslim have not read the Quran in Arabic. They've read translation of it in English, Urdu, or whatever. So is their level of religious because of it? And if so, then what are you saying? They're sort of pseudo-Muslims? I mean, what are you saying?
Well, I mean, that's a good point, but somebody was asking me to bring my evidence about my claim that ant and atom tend to be the same word in Arabic, or at least that's what it's taught inside the Quran. So here we have is 440. And, most even Islamic scholars will say that the best translation is Pickthall. And here he has ant, okay, for this word. Now up here is Sahih International, it's atoms weight, okay? So weight of an ant as opposed to an atom's weight. Now, what I think is unique about this is, so then we'll go to the word for word breakdown, and corpus.quran.com, the hatin, I guess that's how you would say it. So we can go to different ones. Okay. This is every time that this word appears inside the Quran, right? Now, if we go here, the next time that we look at it and we go to the English translation, it's every one of these essentially is now Pickthall has it as an atom's weight, and so does Sahih International. Okay, and then down here at Muhammad Sawar, he does that also. And
this atom weight, this is a kind of ad hoc thing. In I think I checked it up. I think mustard seed is the correct.
But here at Arbery, it's also the weight of an ant. So what I'm getting at here is that when you're trying to propagate a religion, right, language is the best way to do it, you would say, and Islam's very much about that. So what I'm saying is they never wanted their language to progress, because if you keep on adding words, if you keep on adding words, and that makes the Quran less significant. Okay, because the new words come around and they mean new scientific meanings, and then that could mean that the Quran is not true. But if you say, okay, we're going to keep the word for ant and we're going to add on to it this new scientific meaning of atom, then that's what they're doing. They're trying to make it where I think Stops has brought this up before, where I think it was in Egypt, he said once that there was a Muslim that went around and started adding scientific words to Arabic. And that's the whole point, in my opinion, is that they're trying to make it where the language doesn't have to expand, because allegedly Allah gave every useful word needed in Arabic inside the Quran.
What's your view on this, Abu? Because it sounds to me as if you're thinking that there's one particular word and that's the correct word. And what it sounds like is Weitzer is showing that most of the well-accepted English translations seem to have different words there. So how do we establish what the right word is?
No, I mean, I'm not a living dictionary, but I think I checked this up. What did the earliest kind of Arab speakers that we know of, how did they use this word dharra? And if I remember correctly, they used it as mustard seed.
Well, but here's the thing. If it does mean atom, then that would mean that was a Greek word. And a lot of claims from Muslims is it has to be a miracle, because how did Muhammad know something like when they use emberology and it goes really close to Aristotle's, they'll say, well, he didn't know any Greek medicine. There was no way for him to know any of that. So if he was using a word for atom at that time, then that would be another link in the chain to the Greek philosophy concept.
But atom is, I'm not a Greek scholar, but isn't it indivisible, that you can't divide it?
Yeah, they're trying to capture like a word to mean the smallest thing, right? So
but that you can't divide it, which means
translating it as atom, because that's what's now the smallest thing.
I think it was.
Well, that's clearly not the smallest thing anyway, is it? There, so.
No, exactly. It was. I think it was Democritus that kind of imagined the smallest thing that you can't divide anymore, and then it was actually Einstein that proved that atoms exist, but but it turned out that atoms are not really atoms, because first you can divide them into like protons, neutrons, electrons. So they can divide the protons and electrons to quarks, and you can go on. So
the atom is the building block, okay? And then all those other things like quarks and stuff, they're inside of them and they make them up. But the building blocks of the universe are atoms.
Well, I think actually the building blocks is quantum mechanics, but again, I'll need to a recommendation for the panel.
We don't know because we smash things together. But an atom isn't really an atom in.
What is your argument against my argument just then?
No, I didn't know, but it's not really an argument against your whole.
Devil's advocate, kind of.
Yeah, no. I'm not just. It's not an argument against your whole argument about like how the Quran using words on. I mean, yes, this particular word dara, I think it is not connected to the Greek word atom. I think dara, if I remember this correctly, is mustard seed.
Obviously, some of the translations got it wrong.
Another point with this atom thing is just that it's kind of funny that Democritus' meaning of the word atom is not the meaning we use today, because we can divide atoms and we don't know what is the smallest, or if there even is one. I mean, if string theory, which comes
Let's not go too deep, Abu. Okay. Let's not go too deep. I want to bring in Thunderous and TJ, because they've also been a little silent. Do you guys want to comment here in general about the Quran, or anything that the guys have said, or indeed anything Vidhu said?
For me personally, I've never seen the point in arguing over words. When I went back to study Islam after leaving home, I made a point of trying to find the oldest translation into English that I could find. The reason being, I would find a more accurate, close to what, without any prejudice or bias written into the translation. That is to say, if you read later translations of the Quran, you'll find that if they're translated into English, they try and water it down, particularly for the Western audience, because of the access to information. So I found that when I read the older translations, like Pickthall, you find a more, if you like, a more accurate translation from the Arabic language, and you get a better idea as to what the first century of Islam, that is to say, Muhammad's audience, what they would have understood that he was trying to say at the time, not this language argument that we're having, at the whole discussion that we're having at the moment, where I've always gone for the view, I want to try and understand what Muhammad's audience would have understood, not what writers and translators are trying to make people understand today.
Yeah, good point. TJ, do you want to add something in here?
I mean, we can make fun of the Quran, all we want, saying it doesn't make any sense, saying it's incoherent. But I think for us as non-believers, I think it's important to understand that, Islam in its theology, or should I say in its ideology, has a doctrine of warfare against people like us, unbelievers. So I think we need to understand that aspect of it, specifically, because this is something that's not just incumbent upon, a group of Muslims. It's a duty for the entire community. So I think us as non-believers, we need to understand that, and also, look at those verses that call for warfare against us. So whether that be, 9 verse 5, 9 verse 29, 8 verse 39, et cetera, I think we need to understand that doctrine, because that's affecting us today in this real world. That's why we're seeing all these attacks. So I think that side of things, we need to get a better understanding of that, because if we don't understand our enemy, we're going to lose, this entire battle.
Can I just add 2 small points, if I may?
Go ahead.
The thing is, you see, the first small point is that Allah himself says in the Quran, in these surahs, that it is a book made clear and a book made easy to understand. This discussion proves that that's not the case. It's not a book made clear, and it's certainly not a book easy to understand. But also, when you look at, say, Christendom or Christianity through the ages, one thing that they did to stop people understanding what the Bible taught was to keep it hidden in a dead language, Latin. And anybody who tried to translate it into a language that they understood was held as a heretic and was executed at the stake. I mean, many people went into sort of like hiding and were ostracized for trying to translate the Bible into the common tongue. And this is exactly what we're finding today. We've got to a period of time now where Islam can't get away from the fact that this language is going to be translated into an English, and people are going to readily understand in their own tongue what the Quran is actually teaching, which is why you find these arguments about, oh, it's got to be read in Arabic, it's got to be read in classical Arabic, or you're taking out the context. Then they have the rhetorical devices as to what the words mean. Oh, it can mean this, it can mean that, and it can mean the other. That is now the latter state argument, isn't it? Which is why you find that you get the imams and such arguing and keeping their masses, so to speak, no different to what was happening in the Dark Ages when the Christians were kept hidden from what the true text of the Bible was saying. We're finding the same technique out is now being handled by the Muslims, hiding the message of Islam from their own adherents.
I want to put it to the panel, and each of you can give your views here. So we'll go along the panel. So what would be your response? Let's assume you were speaking in Speaker's Corner and you were having a conversation with a Muslim, and I'll start on my left, which is Abu, and work along. And you talked about the Quran, not being clear and so forth. And the response you got was, hey, but there is clear verses, and there's clarity in what you need to be need in order to be a Muslim, and there is some ambiguity. Yes, we accept that, but the scholars, have looked into that, and they've got answers to that. So what we need as a Muslim, the basics that we need as a Muslim, is clear. Whatever isn't clear is just, the scholars to take care of it, and it doesn't affect us as being Muslim. So Abu, and I'll start with you, and we go along the panel. If that was a response from a Muslim, which has been to me, how would you respond to
that? I think it's very hard to respond to that. Is it like that? Then you have to ask yourself the question: what are the clear verses and what are not the clear verses, and then you're gonna have to ask him that. So,
okay,
and wait for that answer.
All right, cool. James, what would you say?
I think it's a topic that's kind of easy to get bogged down by, so I probably would want to move on to something else, but. I guess, I'd say kind of, okay, like that's the generous explanation, but you need to kind of also take into account the alternative that, it was written by a man who kind of wasn't consistent in how he delivered this message, and sometimes he kind of wrote clear instructions, and sometimes he wrote kind of totally vague allegories and kind of gobbledygook, like the kind of first 5 words of every surah, which are kind of like, which everyone admits, oh, no one understands what these words mean, like noon, that stuff, or maybe it's the first 5 letters. So kind of, and then, but like after bringing that up, I'd probably want to just move to a different topic, because I don't think that pointing out, oh, it says here that it's clear, but it's not clear. I'm not sure if it has that much mileage to kind of convince them if they do return with that kind of rebuttal, like, oh, but it's fine because scholars.
Okay, cool. Stops. You still there, my good sir?
Yeah, this is like playing, I'm going on a journey and I'm packing in my bag. I'm taking what Abu said, because this is absolutely true, and I'm adding the what James has said, and what I am adding to the suitcase is the aliases, because you are getting, well, explanations which say, well, for example, what we get in embryology, where one word like alaka or something can mean A, B, C, D. And you need to select now, wherever you are and whatever you're trying to do, this meaning at this moment in time. And if you're talking about something else, then you take it different. Then you take meaning B or meaning C, whatever. So, you know, it's up to you what you make of the Quran in what language. So there's nothing clear. There's nothing in there that is in any way correct.
Cool. Thunderous.
I would turn around and say, well, if Allah himself says that the book is made clear and easy to understand, who are you to decide what is clear and what is easy to understand and what isn't? Because you're in effect then calling your own Allah a liar.
Ah, okay. So good point. Thank you for that. And also I'll add this, and we'll go along to TJ next. So the response would be, but hey, there's people of different intellects, from very smart people to very dumb people. So it's clear for the smart people, but not necessarily clear for the dumb people. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's the sort of response. It's not clear for everybody, and it wasn't meant to be clear for everybody, in the sense that even the people with lower intellect will be able to understand everything. So it's clear for certain human beings, and they will pass that on. That's kind of one of the responses I've had, paraphrased.
Well, I would turn around and say to that then, but then the audience that we have today is a lot more sophisticated and intellectual than what there was in Muhammad's day. So how can you have the argument that they could understand it better as a primitive people than what we are today, more advanced people? We can't understand anything. That doesn't make sense to me.
Good. TJ, what would be your response to the initial question, which is, I'll repeat it, and video is back because we'll bring video in next, and then why so? So a Muslim comes to you and they say, hey, yes, there's some verses that are very clear. There's enough clear verses for me to be a Muslim, no problem. There are some verses that, you know, we're not entirely sure, but there are scholars that know or have got a good idea on some of these verses. So in fact, the Quran is a wonderful book from God. What would be your response?
Well, first of all, it's not written in any particular order, I would say. So reading it in like a chronological order would help, and then understand the doctrine of abrogation would also help as well. I think those two things might help for us as disbelievers at least. But other than that, I mean, it's just such a schizophrenic text. But in terms of what it prescribes against unbelievers and kafirs, I think that's pretty clear, and we need to understand that first and foremost. But I think ultimately reading it in from beginning to end as it was revealed, and understand the doctrine of abrogation, I think those two would be the most important things that I would highlight.
Good. A video over to you. I know you've just come back, so hopefully you heard the question that I posed, which I've had posed to me, or I've had in Speaker's Corner. How would you respond to a Muslim that said that, if you did get the entire question?
If you could just repeat it.
Yeah, sure. So if you're in Speaker's Corner and you're questioning the Quran being from God, from this all-powerful, all-knowing creator that's sending a clear, concise, error-free and complete message, and a Muslim says, hey, I accept that there's certain verses that are not entirely clear to all human beings, but there are scholars that do understand those verses, and there is enough clear things for all human beings to be clearly a Muslim. And so based on that sort of response, I'm claiming that it is from God. How would you respond to a Muslim that said something like that? Bidu, are you there? We're not hearing you.
Hello. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, if I understand the question correctly, firstly, the Quran, the claim of the Quran is that it is perfect in its entirety, not just some of it is true or some of it is clear. The whole thing is supposed to be, I mean, even in the Quran, so it's not just a few verses here and there, saying the whole shebang, that are inconsistent. Secondly, even if some scholars agree that this, that doesn't mean
dropping
that
out a bit the video. We're losing you a bit there. I don't know if anybody else is hearing that. You're dropping every so often. Can you just repeat again?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Try again.
Sure. Even if some scholars agree that a certain verse means X, that does not necessarily mean that X is true. Interpretation of one verse here or there, great, fantastic. Now they have the task of convincing us that X is true, or that we should even something can be true.
Something can
true
be
about myself. So
something can be true. Vida, can you move or get closer to your Wi-Fi or something? You're dropping out. It's very difficult to follow you at the moment.
I'm gonna reconnect, so I'll come back in like 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. In the meantime, we'll move on to why so religious. What would be your response to a Muslim if you were in that conversation? That was the response you got from a Muslim. No, maybe why so has stepped away.
Okay, sorry. I was getting everything ready. I apologize. All right.
Remember, this is in Speaker's Corner, so you're not going to have references. It's more what would be your intuitive.
Well, that's response. The thing. I know all of these verses and everything. I just don't have them. That I could actually cite them. But I would point, like, I knew it was in chapter 11 where Muhammad actually speaks as Allah. So if the word, this is allegedly a clear representation of Allah's word being spoken to Muhammad through Gabriel, then why in 11:2 does Muhammad speak as Allah, or Allah speak as Muhammad, instead of saying to Muhammad, say this to the people? It makes no sense. That's not, it's illogical. And it's not clear to understand if Muhammad is speaking or if Allah is speaking. And I would also say that
I guess a Muslim could respond to you, though. I mean, if we take the devil's advocate, it doesn't matter. A Muslim could respond, and again, I'm just off the top of my head here. They could respond. It doesn't matter whether it was Muhammad speaking or Allah speaking, as long as the message is clear. It doesn't matter.
That would negate the whole claim of the Quran that the words are actually Allah, that Allah created the Quran.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So then it's just a misunderstanding on your part, because obviously it was Allah and you just misunderstanding it. But there are scholars who are smarter than you that have got it right. So it's your fault.
Nope, that wouldn't occur, because in 3:7 of the Quran, it says that you are to believe in the whole of the book, even if it's taken as allegorical and metaphorical. If you don't understand it, you're supposed to believe it as the whole of the book. So when Allah does not say Muhammad to say something as Muhammad, but yet he allows Muhammad to speak as Allah, then there is a big contradiction there in 11:2 of the Quran. And like I said, you have to reference, I think Islam, the Quran itself, kills itself based off of chapter 3, verse 7, which I just cited to you. And that when Allah says that you have to believe the whole of the book, and that you cannot take any of it as figurative or metaphorical, then he really boxed himself in for
Does
the rest of
he actually
the
say
time.
that? Can you read the verse out for us?
Okay, 1 second. And I'll just do this. So 3:7.
Yeah.
It is he who has sent down to you the book. In it are verses precise. They are the foundation of the book, and others unspecific. As for those in whose hearts is deviation, they will follow that of which is unspecific, seeking discord and seeking interpretation. No one knows its interpretation except Allah. But those firm in knowledge say, we believe in it. All is from our Lord, and no one will be reminded except those of understanding. So here, and then if you go to Pickthall, he uses, the actual word allegorical as a translation. And it's saying that anybody who's seeking anything allegorical or figurative, metaphorical, they're actually going against the Quran, because it says those in whose hearts is doubt pursue that which is allegorical, okay, and to explain it. So anytime that
let me bring that up so people have got to keep that verse up there. So just bring it back up there again, just so we've got it up there so people can see it. Because there's, I think you read from Sahih International there. And no one will be the last sentence of Sahih International, and no one will be reminded except those of understanding. So one of the, again, apologetics that's been put out there is that, in fact, the people that don't understand it either have not read it or have chosen not to understand it. But what this actually says, quote unquote, is that there are people of understanding. So the book is, in fact, so the parts that are unspecific are only unspecific to people who haven't bothered or haven't taken the time to. But in fact, there are those people who have understanding for which that isn't the case. Now, I'm just paraphrasing what people say, and I know there'll be immediate responses to that. But what's your response to that? And then I think we'll go across the panel again.
Allah says consistently that only He knows what's in people's hearts, and only He is the one who gives understanding. So how am I to say that you are the one of understanding? And who are you to say that I'm not the one of understanding? It's a back and forth, and that's the reason I think that this verse
I think many of them, though, hang on, Weiss, I think many people will say they're not of understanding, they're not scholars, and scholars would claim that they are
scholars. Even to the scholars, you could say that also, because if they're going to, this is a very wide debate. Obviously, it could go never ending. It's not like a got you debate by any means. But if you're going to sit here and try to say that, well, since I'm a scholar, I'm the one of understanding. That's not how it says in the Quran. It says that only Allah knows who the people of understanding are. So just because you are trying to say that you have a certain understanding, that doesn't make it fact, especially when another Muslim, there are only a few things in the Quran that are actually undeniable, and that's the reason most Muslims have to go to hadith, and then they have to go to tafsirs and such for alleged understanding. And if you look at it how I always try to look at it, which is, if I was a nomadic Muslim in the 7th century desert, never been to Medina, never been to Mecca, and I just heard the Quran from a person, and that's all I heard, never heard hadith or anything, that's how you're supposed to look at the Quran. Okay, so a person,
other Muslims would disagree, right?
Yeah, of course they'll disagree, but they can't disagree on the basis of a nomadic person in Arabia hearing the Quran and then basing his worldview off only the Quran because he doesn't have hadiths. And then if you want to battle that even more, you'd say, well, Muslims followed false hadiths at the exact same time. So then they were not people of understanding, even though they thought they were people of understanding.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right, so let's go back along the panel. Vito, I also see there, but let me just stop you from presenting there.
Okay.
Vito, I also see you're in discussion there, and maybe we'll segue into that. We'll go back along the panel, and you guys can talk more about the Quran, but also I want to bring in an extra topic, which I see Vito is doing there, and this is often a criticism against ex-Muslims. So we can talk about this and the Quran, whichever you guys prefer, as we go back through the panel. And that is that, hey, if you can't recite Surah Al-Fatiha or any other test that certain Muslims give you, then you clearly weren't a true or a Muslim of understanding. And this is obviously a fatuous claim against ex-Muslims. You couldn't possibly have been a true, good, knowledgeable Muslim, because you could never have left the faith. So, Vidu, obviously you've been in there. Can you speak to that, and then we'll go along the panel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, so now people are saying that I have to recite Surah Fatiha, the opening verse in the Quran, to prove that I was a Muslim. Can I just say there are many non-Muslims who also know this, like many Arabs, non-Muslim Arabs, that can read the Quran. I mean, it's a very bad test if you're going to give me that, but I'm happy to do that. Just quickly, A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, ihdinas siratal mustaqim, siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin, Ameen. There you go. We can go on and on. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahus samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And my favorite one is wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr illa allazina amanu wa amilus solihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. So thank you very much, guys.
No, but Vito, you were cheating. You were obviously reading this. You weren't reciting this, right?
Oh, God, I mean, there we go.
It's unfalsifiable. Yeah, it's an unfalsifiable claim. Whatever evidence you provide, there's something that's not going to be right about this. You just couldn't have been a true and honest Muslim. Somehow you were emotional, or whatever the nonsense is. And we'll speak to that a little bit later on.
Yeah. I don't know if you want me to go on a bit more, or you want someone else to.
I think we get the picture. By the way, can you speak Arabic fluently, or is it just that surah that you learned off by heart, or how do you know it in Arabic?
I know in Arabic, just the way vast majority of Muslims know this in Arabic. They just taught at a young age to memorize this stuff. We barely know what it means, or some of us do. but vast majority of Muslims who are non-Arab just like memorize these surahs or read the Quran in Arabic even when they don't understand it. It's just unbelievable, you know. This is it. I mean, I would not recite or memorize something in French if I don't understand it, but hey, it's God's word, so what can I say?
I want to bring in the other two ex-Muslims, obviously here, Thunderous and Abu. So Thunderous first, then Abu. Your thoughts on this claim about you not being a true Muslim?
Well, I would ask, well, who set that standard? Did Allah set that standard? Did Muhammad set that standard? This is just like an invention now, because you've got this wave of Muslim people that were Muslim that are, you know, ex-Muslims that are leaving Islam, being outspoken. So this is a bulwark, if you like, a bulwark argument to try and defend the fact that, well, they could never have been a real Muslim in the first place because they can't do this, can't do that. But that standard is just an invention, because if you go back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or even 35 years ago when I left Islam, that was never put forward as an argument that you were never a real Muslim. So I would say, well, when did this first come out, that you have to recite Surah Fatih Aliha as a demonstration that you were never a real Muslim? You know, this is just an invention, an argument against that.
Abu, your thoughts?
Like some of those tests are like more relevant or plausible than others. Like there are certain things like Surah Al-Fatiha and also this At-Tahiyyatu Lillah wa Salawatu wa Tayyibat, blah, blah, blah. Those two are very hard to forget. Like even if you would isolate yourself or like never think about Islam, it's very hard to forget Al-Fatiha and At-Tahiyyatu Lillah, blah, blah, blah. But then I've heard other versions of this. For example, do you know all 10 promised by paradise? Like there are 10 Sahaba that Muhammad promised by paradise. So this is like, I don't even think most Muslims have memorized them.
Yeah,
so
I think
those
this
are
is
kind
not
of
a test,
quite
as you guys have said.
irrelevant. And then so some tests are more kind of plausible to be relevant, and some are very stupid.
Yeah, but Abu, the whole point is ridiculous right from the word go, because we just heard that everybody is born a Muslim. So how can you be born a fake Muslim if you are born as I don't get this.
Yeah, but like practicing Muslim.
Yeah, well, of course, that claim has never been substantiated. In fact, I think we've falsified that claim that everybody's born a Muslim anyway.
Yeah,
so.
but Muslims don't. We do.
No,
but if a Muslim comes to you, you can ask him, well, hang on, are we born or not?
Yes, and they would have to claim we are. And of course, even if we present evidence to the contrary, you know, they will just ignore that, because evidence and good reasons get in the way of, you know, believing what you believe. James, I'll bring you in, and then TJ, what's your thought on this whole thing about, you know, ex-Muslims, you know, and Ali Dawa and these sort of people, as you know, are quite famous for trying to do this. And of course, there was a video back and forth between Vidu and Ali Dawa, etc. And the disdain and the way it's a hand waving off that, you know, that the responses from ex-Muslims are just ridiculous, emotional, you know, all this sort of nonsense. What's your thoughts?
I haven't gone fully up to date with that, but I think it's a massive. I mean, someone else I think has already said that, like, it's basically it's a victory for, I know, ex-Muslims, because the only way that kind of Islam can be maintained is just by inertia, like social inertia. So the more that they kind of give publicity to ex-Muslims, and the more they kind of talk about it, like the more they're going to kind of end up having kind of people being exposed to rational arguments and rational critique from people who they'll actually listen to, because they're from kind of the similar backgrounds to them, and it's not going to go well for them. So it's a massive misstep. They should just like try and ignore. I mean, I think it was Asadullah Ali, who's another kind of person. I think Vidu's interviewed him, and he like, he's taking the more kind of intelligent strategy, which is saying no, boycott people like Abdullah Samir. Don't discuss, don't talk to them, don't engage with them at all. And so he's doing the more clever strategy. And the even bigger misstep is that I think Ali Dawa has said that he will do a series of videos addressing and refuting the common like ex-Muslim arguments about why they left, such as topics like slavery or science. And that's a really bad idea, because people are going to be smart enough that they can tell what's a kind of BS explanation and what's a decent explanation. Because typically when if you like were to Google like, you know, some problematic hadith like what's Sahih Muslim 3371, which is a talk about a raid on the either the Banu Qurayza or someone like that, and they take these Arab women as captives and then have sex with them and try and discuss, oh, but should we pull out during sex, or why don't we ask Muhammad? Like, and this is a clear example of war rape. But normally the only people who come across that from the Muslim side and like kind of starts asking, oh, I've encountered these doubts about it. Normally the only people from the Muslim side who actually get exposed to that at all would be kind of sort of students of knowledge, or you know, these people who are quite into it and are quite invested in it. Whereas Ali Dawa's main audience will have quite a lot of those people, but it'll also have quite a lot of kind of casual Muslims. So if he starts talking about these topics and exposes these topics to kind of quite sort of casual Muslims, he doesn't want them thinking about these things. He wants them to be really as ignorant as possible if he wants to kind of keep them within the fold. So if he and his crew do try and like actually provide some apologetic arguments for things like sexual slavery or jihad or these other kind of very clear-cut, atrocious behavior by Muhammad and his companions, then it's just going to be a disaster. So I hope he follows through with this, and it will be a fun time in the coming months if he does.
Yeah, so he's going to highlight it so that we can bring the critique to it. Yeah, I agree. TJ,
because he's giving oxygen to it, isn't he? He's just going to give it oxygen, and then the fire will grow. But yeah. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, that's good. TJ.
Could you repeat the question? I stepped away for a couple minutes. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So, what's your thoughts on the attempted demonization ad hominems and this sort of stuff that ex-Muslims can't really have been Muslims? They left for emotional reasons. They didn't really understand the Quran or any other version of that sort of approach.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a typical knee-jerk reaction, I think. But I think more importantly that if Islam is so perfect and it's so true and it's the last and final revelation that's going to be the salvation for mankind. I think that people leaving it, I mean, that would permanently undermine it ultimately. And so instead of giving that credence, instead of giving that thought or anything, it's the whole knee-jerk reaction. Oh, they were never a true Muslim to begin with. No. Don't listen to him, because it's going to permanently undermine their whole worldview. So that's the way I look at it.
Stops. I think you did say something, but do you want to add anything else?
Not really, because it just shows how desperate they are. It just shows you that most Muslim apologists believe in numbers. It's only in numbers that they are strong. It's only in numbers that will convince them. And if now the numbers are decreasing, then the arguments for them are not so convincing anymore. And I don't know how it works. It only works for them if the majority of people are doing the same thing as you do. Then the social aspect comes in and says, well, if the others are doing it, it can't be so bad. But now if everybody's leaving Islam, they've got a problem, because then these arguments don't work anymore. So they're desperately trying to stop this and make it look. This is why you have this propaganda thing. Islam is the the quickest or whatever growing religion on the planet. That's bullshit. But this is the kind of propaganda that you need, because they are so shit scared of losing, numbers and of becoming I forgot the word. It's too small to be considerate. To be considered. No. If you're no longer a force.
Okay, so you don't sort of well, it kind of is inconsequential in a sense. What's it?
Is it impotent?
No.
Yeah, and to build off that point too, Stops. What's his name? The leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, the spiritual leader, Yusuf al-Qaradawi. he said it plainly. I mean, you know, he said that if they had gotten rid of the apostasy punishment, Islam wouldn't exist today.
Yeah.
So he spells it out clearly. So I mean, it doesn't get more clear, like, you know, clearer than that, does it?
I think you made a great point, though, Stops. I think like Ira and EF Dawa and all of these lot know that, you know, there's a major concern here of people, you know, leaving Islam. So what can we do? Clearly, the arguments for Islam have failed miserably. And so what other strategies can we employ? I know what we'll do is we will, quote unquote, attack atheism. We'll attack Christianity. What we're going to do is try and eliminate the competition. Now, this, of course, again, for gullible and ignorant Muslims, you know, this might work in the sense that it might give them some more confidence in their own belief. And it doesn't obviously make their belief true. So that's a fallacy in and of itself. But again, it's the particular audience that they are targeting, which is the gullible, the ignorant. If they can feel more confident in their worldview because they're quote unquote smart people, or, you know, attacking other religions and non-religions and ideas and so forth, then, you know, somehow that gives them, you know, more. It doesn't make their religion true, but it gives them more sort of hope or makes them feel better. So I think that's it. It is all a PR thing, and they don't really have much. So when you're riding on fumes, you've got to come up with some other, you know, methodology. And I think obviously Ira and other people have demonstrated this poorly, but that's what seems to be the case. So I wanted to ask again, all the panel, maybe it's a case of we can all just jump in, because otherwise we're going, you know, and people don't really get a chance. But between you guys, could you, each of you, as you go, and again, we can start on one end and then just move through. What do you think, and I'm going to use this word in inverted commas, what do you think the strongest argument from a Muslim is that you've heard? Now, bear in mind, obviously, it's not something that's convincing, but what do you think is the strongest thing, if anything, that you've heard from a Muslim? And if there isn't anything, I accept that, you know, anything that, let me put it this way. What's the strongest thing that you think could convince somebody that was unsure and hadn't done a lot of homework and stuff like this? Because we see these converts, you know, converting to Islam in Speaker's Corner every couple of weeks or whatever the case is. So for that sort of person that's not particularly critical thinking and hasn't read it, doesn't know anything about the Quran, but likes something about it, what do you think would be convincing for that sort of person? Why so?
Well, the normal default, you know, whenever you go to an Islamic bookshop, or if you go to a halal meat shop and you're looking at the DVDs and the literature they've got to the side, the normal default to attract people to Islam is the wonderful science, the embryology and all that other stuff. That is their default now in order to get people in. It must be the truth. Go look at because of the sophistry that they use with trying to wangle and, you know, square pegs in round holes to try and fudge the figures to make the Quran look as though it has come from God. And I guess the second one that they try and win the argument with is that the Bible's been corrupted. They're the two big, if you like, you know, they're your left hook and your right hook, if you like, as far as Islamic Dawah is concerned.
Okay, good. Whoever else wants to step in, go ahead.
I would say if the Quran says real clear that you're only going to believe if Allah allows you to believe, if he wills and guides you to believe. So it could be that Allah presented himself to you at this very moment, but you still wouldn't believe unless he allows it to occur. And that's the reason I laughed in the comments with the question, because if a person, you know, it has really no personal decision if a person believes. It's not like in Christianity, even though, you know, there is no free will in the concept of a God at all, if a God is all knowing and such. But at least in their concept, they believe it as in faith, personal faith. Well, in Islam, it teaches that Allah guides whom he wills and gives the choice of becoming Muslim to who he wills. And then after that, faith is given by Allah. It's not really up to the individual at all. So to me, the question is rather redundant and ridiculous. Cool. If you know anything about Islam and the Quran.
Okay. Vidu, you've obviously been in the corner a few times. You might have seen a few people taking their shahadas. What's your view? What do you think is convincing for, you know, the less critical thinking people that, you know, maybe are looking for something that Islam might have?
Yeah, similar things to what have already been said, like scientific miracles, that kind of stuff. Also, the whole sort of argument, like, nothing came from, the whole sort of, you've got parents, where do they come from? Where do they come from? Therefore, there must be a God, and therefore, if God created the universe, then He must have wanted you to live in a certain way. And the Quran is the only book that hasn't been corrupt. All that sort of stuff, I would say, plays into it. And also the fact that, I mean, I've heard this argument as well. People say that, look at what Muhammad did, in terms of, he had his own movement or religion, and that spread so quickly and very far in a short amount of time. That is a testament to the power of Islam. I've also heard this argument, maybe not the stronger arguments, but it's a different argument that I've also heard as well. It spread very quickly, so on and so forth, and this is amazing the message was. But I think the main arguments have been sort of, they keep recycling this kind of stuff. Scientific miracles, the language is amazing, hasn't been changed. That doesn't mean it's from God. It just means literally that it hasn't been changed. Of course, that's not proof of anything. So yeah.
Good. TJ, what do you think would be convincing to the less, the more gullible, sort of less critical thinking people who are looking for something, maybe missing something in their lives and might be attractive to them from Islam?
I just think people can't deal with, with existence, the whole, meaninglessness of suffering, and, why does, quote unquote bad things happen to good people and all that stuff. And people tend towards thinking that their meaning has, that their life has their life has no meaning. So I think that's why they gravitate towards that. And instead of being a nihilist and just, going about their lives, I think that it fills in a void. But I don't think people read into fully what that is exactly, what that void is filled in with. But nonetheless, I think it gives people meaning in a meaningless universe.
Okay, good. Stops, your thoughts? What do you think?
Well, nothing really. What I heard the best ever was given to me last Wednesday by this very attractive mother, intellectually attractive, of course, when she said, well, you don't need to take anything in the Quran literally. You don't need to take anything seriously. You don't do that. You just look at the stuff that makes sense to you, that gives you some peace and freedom, that gives you something that you think is the justification for your action, which makes you a better person. And
you did drop off there, Stop. Sorry, I don't know if it was just me, but you dropped off. Can you say what that woman said again? Because I lost you there.
Oh, sorry. She said that she takes from Islam whatever justifies her actions of being a good person. And she doesn't really say, this is what the Quran says or something. No, she just says, Islam tells me that there is a God that wants her to be a good person, and that by being a good person, she is the good person that this God wants to be. So she is 100% saying, I created this God in my mind, and I see some words which justify this in the Quran, and that's why I believe it.
So I take it that this woman doesn't mind going home and getting beaten by her husband, and she doesn't mind sharing the house with 3 other women that are also wives to her one husband, and he can plow his field with that whichever sexual position that he wants with his wife. So
no, exactly not. Exactly not. She says no.
Those are the verses she's taken because she wants to do the best that she can. Because
no. Those she rejects. This is the whole point. She rejects what she doesn't like and only takes and accepts what she does like.
Yeah,
this is exactly this. Yeah, but this is the funny thing in the brain. She only says those things don't really reflect what this God wants me to be and wants other people to be. This is why I am only good and other people are only good if we are looking after the well-being of everybody, and that means being a good Muslim, and this is what we get from the Quran. The rest I reject. It's selective. That's all it is.
Yeah, but the point I was trying to make with that was there's not really much in the Quran for a woman to select. That was the point. There's not much left for her to choose to be a good Muslim.
Yeah, this is true.
Okay, good. James, what's your thought? What have you seen or heard, or what do you think is convincing to sort of people that want to convert that haven't looked at this thoroughly?
I think the most reasonable, I haven't seen anything that's kind of reasonably convincing to kind of a reasonable, skeptical or rational person, unless they've been given like incorrect information. So like if someone was told, oh, the Quran says this kind of amazing thing that I couldn't have known, and then he doesn't do the kind of due diligence to check, oh, but is this amazing claim actually the case? Then I know maybe that kind of person could be persuaded. But otherwise, it seems to be like the closest thing I can think of to a sort of convincing thing would be just like kind of it's just like saying, oh, but like, you know, the Quran teaches you to live your life in a good way, and so that must be from God. But even that's kind of that's just hand wavy and kind of nonsense. Yeah, so I really can't think of anything convincing, and I might just kind of be lacking imagination or empathy. Like it seems as though they just have a bunch of tricks to kind of lure people in, like kind of sneaky salesmen or like kind of cult indoctrinators. Like it just seems like they have a bag of tricks that I could imagine why they would work, but they're still just like, you know, tricks and you know, emotional manipulation and other kind of shady stuff like that. Not like genuinely convincing or intellectually kind of compelling.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If you look into the claims, then yeah, that would be the case. Abu, what's your thoughts?
Well, if you're talking about convincing in the sense like this is logically or
no, so
empiricism, or
consider somebody who's not looking at it, because I think we can all agree that if you really use your critical thinking, skepticism, and rationality, you wouldn't be convinced. But assuming that wasn't, you know, running at its full capacity, what do you think could be convincing for somebody if those three things were not operating perhaps as they should be?
But this is what I mean by convincing, because the obvious thing that I think about is that if you say, like, my argument is that if you don't become a Muslim, you will burn in hell and be tortured forever. That is not a kind of a good argument in the sense that, like, it's like it's not a good like rational argument, but it works because it hacks into the person's limbic system and and then the logical parts of the brain deactivates, and then, oh, I don't want to go to hell. Okay, I shouldn't lie.
But interestingly enough, Darren Hamza, actually, that was the tipping point for him. It's in a video where he's being interviewed by somebody, and obviously claims he did intellectual investigation, which I think is comedy in of itself. But the thing that really sort of tipped him over the point was the fear of hell. And he actually made that statement that I already believed in God, and then I did this intellectual investigation in inverted commas. But the tipping point for me was, you know, the whole thing about hell.
Can I just say, you know, what might also convince people as well is when you look at the certain demographics of Islam and where it seems to succeed, particularly within cultures, you find that a lot of the Afro-Caribbean community seem to be inclined towards Islam as opposed to Caucasian people. And I certainly found out when I was growing up that Muslims had the tendency of sucking up to the Afro-Caribbean community. And when you look at Muslims growing up today, they have that Afro-Caribbean sort of that persona. They listen to the hip hop, they like R&B, they will talk gangster, they'll wear black cultural clothes, and, you know, have that kind of colloquial language that they speak. And what I found was that you know, if you're predisposed towards violence and aggression, Islam is perfect for you. If you're predisposed to liking to, you know, having sex with a lot of women and fornicating and having just that kind of lifestyle, Islam is for you. And if you want a God that's going to promote violence and sex, Islam is for you. So, you know, not just in this world, but in the hereafter too. So when you're talking about, you know, who's it going to appeal to, what will convince people, the fact that a man can have as many women as he wants, Islam is for you. The fact that if you want to be violent, just do it in the name of Islam, Islam is for you. Sign me up.
What you're saying is that Islam as a whole, or as like the whole concept of Islam, appeals to men with cluster B personality disorders.
There it is.
Yeah, I think I'll just say something, then I'll pass over to you, Why. So I think the moral sort of argument seems a very strong one. I've seen some videos where people have been convinced, and in fact, there's a guy called Jordan, I think there's a convert Jordan who I think has apparently got a university degree, etc. And he sits down with Darren Hamza, and it appeared, and I need to watch the video again, so I'm happy to stand corrected. But part of what he seemed to say, if I remember correctly, was that he was very impressed with the quote unquote the moral stance of Islam, like, you know, alcohol is forbidden and these sort of things. So here, in my view, you have somebody who's kind of looking at the Western system and go, okay, there's too many drunks, there's too many of these things, and some of these supposed, you know, moral claims of Islam seem to be a solution to this, which is, you know, banning alcohol and this sort of thing. And I think that was part of the reason. I'm not going to claim, you know, I'm not going to claim without having watched the entire video again. That was the entire reason.
Yeah, like just because Islam appeals to some men with cluster B personality disorder doesn't mean that all converts are cluster B men. So there are different reasons, but like.
But those are sort of strawman arguments as well, aren't they? It's easy to sort of like look at something immoral in society or something that's nefarious, or where there's a neglect, or where there is some kind of rebellion or no rule, and then say, well, actually Islam will actually create a better environment because of X, Y, and Z. That's not a convincing argument unless you're playing to the mind of the obtuse, irrespective of how academic a person is. I dare say most of the panel, for all the panel, I've met academic people, but they lack common sense and thinking ability as far as being streetwise savvy is concerned. So when I listen to those moral arguments, they're also playing the argument because what they consider the Western society to be, the decadent West, that Europe and America are Christian-based. So they're playing the argument as an Islamic argument against a Christian-based society, which we know America and Europe are not Christian-based, but that's the argument put forward, hence why it's convincing.
I was waiting to see if anybody would add this in a way. If you want to believe something, you'll just believe it. It's not, you know, people who want to believe in Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, even though there's no real evidence for it, they're just going to believe it. And with Islam, I would say it also goes to the point that that if you want to believe in a God, right? And then there's the concept of Judaism God, Abrahamic God, and then there's the concept of Jesus as God, and then there's the concept of Islam. One thing Islam does, and you know, so does Christianity in a way. If you're born Muslim and you start disbelieving in Islam, then a Christian can come to say to you, oh no, well, we believe in God, and the thing is that you were taught wrong about Jesus. And then if you're a Christian and you start disbelieving in Christianity, a Muslim can come to you and say, oh no, we believe in God, you were taught wrong about Jesus. You know, you were taught wrong about Muhammad. And one thing Islam also does very uniquely is by being ambiguous about who the prophets are, they'll open it up to anybody. Like I was watching this one sheikh saying that he was asked if Buddha was a prophet, and he said, I thought about this a lot. You know, it's possible that Buddha was one of the prophets that wasn't spoken of, but that his message was changed. So if you like anybody in history before Muhammad, you could take it as, oh, well, he might have been a prophet. It's just that humans made his message corrupt, and it really opens it up to any religion, you know.
I think that was Abdul Rahim Green. I stand to be corrected.
Correct.
On that. Yeah, well, yeah. So, because I remember that that discussion that he had. But then, when Islam has 124,000 prophets in the past, the first one being Adam and the last one being Muhammad, you could pretty much say anybody was a prophet.
That was my point. That was my point. That they're so open to it but they can't prove any of it. That if you want to believe in a God, okay, it's just like how they'll say that there's the belief that Dhul-Qarnayn was Alexander the Great and that humans just totally messed up on history. And that Alexander the Great or Dhul-Qarnayn was really a Muslim, but for some reason they decided to rewrite it and say that he was the son of Zeus. You know, so that's what I'm getting at, is all they have to do is say, oh, you want to believe in a God? Well, we have the one true God, and we have tons of prophets throughout history, messengers that we just don't know who they are. So your belief could adapt to ours.
I want to bring in Video. I think Video wanted to say something. Stops. I'm just going to take a quick walk downstairs. I'm logged in as Speaker's Corner, so if you can just moderate, and I'll be back shortly to the main computer.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Wiso, because I remember speaking to my friend who's Muslim, and we were talking about, I think, Greek philosophy, and he was like saying, "Oh, Socrates is so great," and he was persecuted by his people for speaking the truth. And I said, you know, as a joke, well, you never know. He could have been a prophet. And he said, yeah, it's possible. It's possible because, you know, he was trying to tell people the truth, and, you know, everyone was after him. He was accused of corrupting the young and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, we can apply this to literally anyone in history before Muhammad. Say they could have, you know, if he's good, he could have potentially been a prophet. So it's a nice, neat trick that some Muslims like to play.
But the thing is that with the logistics of what you've just said there are astronomically impossible, because if Buddha was a prophet and if Socrates was a prophet, that means every piece of literature up until the Quran would have had to have been corrupted.
And if you want to believe in a God, then you are willing to deny all historical facts or scientific reasonings, depending on what your belief of God will be. You know, that's just the way it is. Like how there's one quote unquote former atheist who's now a Christian who would come onto my channel, and she supports the concept that the earth existed before the sun and the stars and the moon. But she would never have believed that without the Bible telling her that. But as soon as she wanted to have belief in a God, she was willing to accept that as 100% true. And that's why I was getting at with if you want to believe in something, it doesn't take evidence. It doesn't matter if there's evidence contrary to it. If you want to believe something, you will believe it.
Yeah, that's rationalization.
Well, I mean, we're not religion, belief in something that is intangible and is not provable is not really rational. So you can't really hold religious people up to rationalization standards.
No, rationalization in the sense that you'll rationalize the justification to believe it.
Well, I mean, most would say that it's cognitive dissonance, but me, I think it's more like religious privilege. That we've come into a time where, you know, Muslims nowadays, you know, who want to say, oh, well, slavery was just for the time of Muhammad and it's not for now. I would love for them to say that while they were standing next to Muhammad, and see if their religious privilege of living in a time frame where there is slavery is looked down upon, and them having this interpretation would be legit to him or not.
I would like to see them say that standing next to Mike Tyson.
But listen, guys, don't you find that most of the justifications today are not for the existence of a God or for the existence of anything like Muhammad, but is actually the justification for the belief itself? That they're trying to only say, well, I'm okay to believe this because everything makes sense if I only believe this. So this is what I see. Don't you agree with that?
Well, I'm about to get off here, and I just want to say thanks for having me on, Stops and Rob. I appreciate it. But just to end with what you were saying, that's the reason I opened up with the only reason for believing in as far as Islam is that Allah allows you to, that he guides you to, that he wills you to, because outside of that, there is no rational belief. There is no reason to believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
because he's the one who makes the decision, not you. And he gives all these signs in the Quran. It even says that the Quran is a sign for people to ponder, to think about becoming Muslim and following him, but it's still his decision. There could be plenty of Muslims out there who think that they're following Islam and then actually are Muslims, but in Allah's eyes, nope, they're not. He's not really guiding them on the true path. He's just leading them a whole life of astray, and that's his scheme, if you will.
That's cannon fodder. Yeah.
Can I ask then, if the Quran was to serve as a sign, and it wasn't written until about 200 years after Muhammad's death, in that period of time, how did the Quran serve as a sign?
Well, you're not looking at it as far as the Quran states itself as such as the Quran, which is, recitation, so it's really a recitation. It's really a saying of things. And the Quran actually compares, are those that hear the same as those who can see. It makes that distinctive declaration. But also you have to think that inside the Quran, it says that the Quran is inside of paradise with Allah as a preserved slate. So it wouldn't really matter that there's a time gap in between when the Quran, and the only way that you can make that justification that the Quran wasn't around at the time is if you follow hadith. If you read the Quran, the Quran states as itself being a book in physical form at the time of Muhammad. So you would, so you can either take the Quran's word for itself, or you can go to hadiths that allegedly say that, no, it wasn't made until Uthman, X amount of years later. But the Quran itself actually refers to itself as being wrote down at the time by scribes. Did that answer you, Thunder?
Yeah.
Well, it's an answer, but there's no evidence to say that it was written down at the time of Muhammad.
Well, there's no evidence. There's no evidence to say that it wasn't. There's no evidence to say that it wasn't outside of hadith that came around years later. And then that would actually, if you want to look at it from a stance of trying to verify the Quran, then that's a bunch of desert dwellers who think that the best form of verification is to say, I was told by X, who was told by X, who was told by X.
Oh, yeah, of course, that was the thing I was trying to get at.
If hadiths, I just look at it like this: if the hadiths never resurfaced as Sahih or anything like that, then the Quran would be the circular reasoning, a proof of itself that it was actually formed in the time of Muhammad. But then you go outside of that, and maybe Muslims are being asked questions of, well, when was your Quran created? Because our Bible was created at such and such date, and who wrote it, who compiled it. So Muslims have to come up with these stories to answer these people, these critics.
You okay with that, Thunderous?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm pondering what's being said.
And
once
if
again,
anybody wants to demolish us, if anybody wants to come and demolish us, feel free to come on the Jinn&Tonic show, talk to us, demolish us by all means. Like I always say, if somebody shows that I am wrong, I am learning something. But so far, this has not happened. Now, is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about here at the moment?
I just want to say thank you for having me on today. And I saw Academic Screeching asking if I would do something with Go Live Media. I'm not allowed to stream. I got a strike on my channel. So Go Live, I've offered this to you before. If you ever want to, I'll come on your channel. Not a problem. I never step away from debates. I just have to go to work. Thank you for having me on today.
So you misbehaved?
Well, yeah, I got a nudity strike from my meme compilation video that was up for a year and a half, and all of a sudden I got a nudity strike. I censored everything in it, so I don't know.
Well, there's a guy who's looked at it for 1 year. He finally got an erection. So isn't that good?
I think he might have got an erection from the hadiths, but then blamed my the hadiths that I cited, and then actually blamed the pictures with censors on it.
Oh, goodness.
I'm also on nudity strike.
Did you expose yourself?
All right, thank you, and I appreciate. Tell Rob when he gets
Thanks,
back. I
Mr.
appreciate
Religious.
you having me on.
Yeah, I'm
See you
walking at
next
the moment.
week.
Cheers, man.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah, I'm just walking outside in the middle of London. So yeah, no, that's good. Thanks, Weiser. Anybody else in the panel have anything to say on what we've chatted about here? Don't all jump in at once. Come on now.
No, I think we can put it to a graceful ending and put it to bed.
I mean, some people want to do an after show again, maybe the chat, because you and I can leave Stops, but I'm walking on my phone at the moment. If you're in the chat and you want to join, or if you want to be in an after show, then just hit a 1 there to let us know. Otherwise, we'll bring it to a close of the live stream.
I'm going to close it because I've got FIFA 19 and I need to practice.
Oh, yeah. Priorities. Get on that game then. Go on then. Thanks, Thunderous.
No problem. Good night, lads. Thanks so very much for this week.
Good night.
Good night.
Cheers.
James, anything else?
Yeah, thank you very much for having the show.
Yeah, if there's anything else you want to add, if not, that's all good.
Can't think of anything at the moment.
Remember to speak nicely to your wife, Peter. We'd love to have her.
Oh yes, absolutely. I will remind her, and hopefully we'll make it happen very soon. Thank you much. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, Stops. Have you got a hadith of the day?
I do. As a matter of fact, I do. I just looked it up. Okay, I was cheating. I just found it. Narrated Usama bin Zayd. Somebody different. It's different. The Prophet said, a Muslim cannot be the heir of a disbeliever, nor can a disbeliever be the heir of a Muslim. So in other words, there's no heritage anywhere if a non-Muslim is concerned. That's how angry God is with the non-Muslims.
Okay.
Fake or not.
I thought you were going to have a longer one, Stops, because I have to walk back to my.
Oh, should I give you a story then from okay?
Yes.
From Abu Huraira, from our favorite Abu Huraira. Allah's Messenger said there were two women with whom there were their two sons. A wolf came and took away the son of one of them. That lady said to her companion, the wolf has taken your son. The other said, but it has taken your son. So both of them sought the judgment of the Prophet. David, who judged that the boy should be given to the older lady. Then both of them went to the Prophet, and to Prophet Solomon, son of David, and informed him of the case. Solomon said, give me a knife so I may cut the child into two portions and give one half to each of you. The younger lady said, do not do so, may Allah bless you, he is her child. On that, he gave the child to the younger lady, Sahih Bukhari 6769, book 85, hadith 45. Does that story sound familiar in any way to anyone?
Yes.
It's from, was it 1 Kings 3? And this is how you see that all these stories somehow come together. All these stories circulated in the area, in the region, during the time, and you find them in the Quran. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week on the Gin and Tonic Show. And if anybody wants to come and demolish us, please do. Please feel free to come and demolish us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Got stuck in a lift and it killed my signal. It's like a bulletproof lift or something. Thank you to everybody. And I think everybody's left. So good night to everybody. And I will stop the show now.